Chapter 993. Hearing Alu say that he could bite, Ajio's face immediately changed. Roar dash, his 10 fingernails suddenly bent and pressed down on the man. Then he grimaced and lowered his head. His movements were very fast, so fast that the man didn't have time to struggle and screamed. Ah dash! Bang 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 dash! His screams immediately made everyone react. The guns in their hands quickly shot at Ajio. The people in the car behind all stuck their heads and hands out of the window and shot at Alu on the roof of the first car. Alu just flashed and disappeared. Then they suddenly felt the car under them shake. Puff, puff, puff dash. Before they noticed anything, several sharp stone protrusions suddenly shot out from the ground under the chassis of the first and last 2 cars, directly penetrating the 2 cars from the bottom to the top. Ah dash, some people in the car didn't dodge and were penetrated. Some reacted quickly and quickly rolled out of the window and rolled to the ground. Roar dash! At this time, the group of zombies blocking in front suddenly rushed over here. Their faces were ferocious, and they opened their mouths to reveal a mouthful of white teeth. They waved their claws and rushed forward. They surged forward in a crazy and ferocious manner. Because the car in the middle was carrying a hostage, Alu didn't attack this car. But the wheel was pierced, and the car was directly destroyed. So when the people in the car got out, they also dragged the people of the base with their hands tied and their bodies drugged. They pulled them back, wanting to escape and take away the people they caught. This was their mission, and they had to complete it even if they died. After Ajio bit the person he threw himself at, he saw several bullets shooting at him. He didn't dodge, but firmly pressed down the struggling person on the ground and continued to bite. Puff, puff, puff dash, the bullets hit him, but he didn't care. Okay, it's enough to bite him to death. Don't eat so much. Be careful that the leader will punish you when we get back. Did you forget what the leader said? At this time, Alu flashed to his side, grabbed Ajio's collar, and then threw him to the side. He casually glanced at the corpse on the ground, which had half its neck bitten off by Ajio. Then, he turned around and stretched out his hand towards the people who were running away. Then, he made a strange movement with his palm. As the group of people ran, a crack suddenly appeared under their feet, and 2 or 3 of them, who couldn't stop in time, fell into the crack. Someone reacted quickly and grabbed the edge of the crack. As a result, the person who was holding onto the edge of the crack was immediately kicked down by the zombie hunters who were tied up. Don't move. If you move, I'll kill them. The Skyfire soldiers pointed their guns at the base and shouted at Alu. At this time, Alu's face is wearing sunglasses. No one can see that he is a zombie. The people present only saw Ajio, the zombie, but this zombie seemed to be controlled by the man wearing sunglasses. It was the same for the zombies. Holding on to their last glimmer of hope, Skyfire's people assumed he was there to rescue the men they'd captured. Therefore, when there was no way out, they immediately used their lives to threaten the other party. Alu's face was expressionless, and he stood quietly without a word. The members of Heavenly Fire thought that their actions had deterred the other party, and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, they cautiously retreated to the side with the hostages in their hands, trying to find a way to escape. Alu's eyes narrowed beneath his glasses. The sweet smell of flesh and blood permeated the air around him. He licked his teeth, trying to ignore the hunger in his heart. He really did want to save the people from Universal, because they hadn't revealed their location to outsiders. For that reason alone, Alu wouldn't let them die. But he wasn't going to let them go. Bang bang bang. Just then, there was a series of explosions. Several of the Skyfire soldiers standing in obvious positions had their heads blown off. The man who'd pointed his gun at the hostages had his head sliced in half. Red and white blood sprayed out, spraying the faces of the people around him. It was a long-range sniper rifle that had blown off their heads. 1,000 meters away, there was a man lying prone on the roof of a building, armed with a long-range sniper rifle. Of course, if he took off his sunglasses, it was hard to tell if he was human or not. Alu's hand moved when he saw the enemies' heads explode. The ground where the people from the Universal Life Base were standing suddenly caved in, and they fell into a pit that was not very deep. The 3 remaining Skyfire soldiers were pounced on by the zombies that came out of nowhere and ripped to shreds. By the time everything was cleaned up, the bodies were eaten by the zombies. Only then did Alu bring the people from the 4 underground bases up. These are special times. Please come back to the base with me. As he spoke, 2 cars drove out from the fork in the road. They untied the 4 men and helped them into the cars. Since they'd seen their fighting style, they had to be taken back to deal with the aftermath. Grrrr. Alu leapt onto the roof of the car and sat cross-legged. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips clean, not caring if he couldn't lick them clean. As a result, the area around his mouth was still sticky with red blood. On the other side, Qingyu was unconscious in the cinema. Not long after she fell unconscious, the door to the giant screen hall she was in opened, and a figure walked in. He didn't take out his flashlight to illuminate the place, instead sniffing left and right. Then he made his way to the last row. He quickly made his way to Qinyu's seat, helped her up, and helped her to a chair. Qinyu's wound was still bleeding, the result of a wind blade. It was deep. The shadowy figure looked at the wound, and couldn't help but take 2 deep breaths. Then he exhaled. Then he pulled out the equipment in his pocket. First aid gauze and hemostatic powder. He sprinkled the powder on Qinyu's wound, then tied 3 knots in the gauze. Once the wound was dealt with, the shadowy figure took out a tube of medicine, opened her jaw, and poured it into her mouth. Then he got up, carried her on his back, and walked out of the theater. After walking out of the theater, the shadowy figure's face was revealed. Black hat, black sunglasses, a camouflage combat uniform, and long hair tied behind her head. It was the female zombie that controlled the zombies to intercept the 3 people chasing after Qinyu. She was a level 5 female zombie, and also one of the dozens of level 5 leaders Xie Dong brought for this operation. Her height was a bit taller than Qinyu, at least 1.75 m model height, and it was a standard model body. Only wearing a loose combat uniform, she didn't seem so slender, but gave people a kind of heroic spirit. Chapter 994. At night, Xie Dong sent the news back to Lin Xiao. The people that should be saved were all saved, and the people that should be killed were all killed. Did anyone miss out? Lin Xiao looked at the level 4 wind zombie in front of her and asked. This level 4 wind zombie was one of the first few level 4 zombies that she gave to Xie Dong. It was also the fastest one, so if Xie Dong didn't report personally, he would be sent. The level 4 wind zombie shook his head, indicating that no one escaped. Lin Xiao nodded. That's good, you can go. She didn't need to say anything more. Since Xie Dong was an old officer in the army, he knew how to clean up the traces and collect the spoils of war after the battle. The level 4 wind zombie quickly turned around and left Lin Xiao's office. Mama, I'm hungry. Just when the wind zombie left, Tung Tung, who was lying on the sofa, opened his mouth. He said softly. Lin Xiao looked at him with annoyance and said, You just drank a bowl of milk an hour ago. Why are you hungry so quickly? Tung Tung also said with annoyance, I'm just hungry. My intestines are good at digestion. I'm a baby. Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly. Is there a baby that can talk as soon as he is born? Other than your short body, you don't look like a baby at all. When Tung Tung heard that he was short, he immediately exploded. I will grow up quickly. I'm not short. I'm still developing. Can you treat me like a normal baby? I'm still a baby. After a week of growth, Tung Tung had grown into a white and chubby little bun, and he had enough strength to talk. He wouldn't be like the beginning, where he had to rest after speaking for a long time. He even had the strength to shout. Lin Xiao quickly reached out her hand to stop him. Okay, I got it. Don't use your demonic voice to attack me. Little man, you've changed since you became a boy. You're not like the cute little man from before. As soon as she finished, Tung Tung began to shout again. Aw, Mama, can you call me by my current name? Don't always call me little man. It's so annoying. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said without giving him any face, I've gotten used to it and can't change it. What can I do? It's my fault, Tung Tung said angrily. If I don't blame you, do you want to blame me? It's been so many days, Mama. You should have changed. Yo, you two are fighting again? At this time, a voice suddenly came from the door of Lin Xiao's office and teased the two of them. I say, why are you two so noisy? Lin Xiao looked at Lin Hao, who walked in, pointed at his son and said, "He has changed. He is no longer the little man I know. He might have been swapped." Pfft, who would say that to their newborn baby? Lin Hao laughed without giving him any face. "Uncle, I think I must have been picked up by Mama. She doesn't love me anymore." Tung Ting rolled over on the sofa and retorted, "You came just in time. He just said he was hungry. Feed him milk, I'm busy here." Lin Xiao immediately pointed at the thermos on the coffee table and said, because Tung Tung was adamant about not using a milk bottle, Lin Xiao had to serve him with a small bowl when he said he was hungry, like a little ancestor. Unfortunately, other than his mother and several uncles, this child refused to let anyone else feed him. People like Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen could hug him, but he wouldn't do it if they fed him. What's wrong with him? Lin Xiao thought in disgust. Lin Hao walked in, took off his doctor's coat, and threw it aside. Then he sat on the sofa and opened the thermos, pouring milk into the small bowl on the table. Then he carried Tung Tung, who was crawling on the sofa like a turtle, into his arms. Lin Hao asked while feeding, "I heard that there are some people from Skyfire Base outside these few days. How's the situation?" There were a number of wounded that had been sent to the infirmary that afternoon. Most of them were gunshot wounds, and some were caused by disciplines. Lin Xiao continued to read the data reports from the plantation. Without lifting his head, he said, "Xiedong said it's been taken care of. But it's just a test. There's more to come." Lin Hao asked, "Are you going to wait for them to come? Deal with them as they come?" Lin Xiao said, "I'm more worried about those underground creatures. Before we deal with them effectively, we can't deal with them." "Do you think I can leave here to deal with Skyfire Base 1,000 miles away?" Lin Hao nodded. "That's true, they're so close. If you leave with a large number of powerful zombies, these things might come out to cause trouble." Lin Xiao said nothing. When Qin Yu woke up, she found herself in a room that looked like a hospital room. She propped herself up into a sitting position. The pain coming from her arm made her look down subconsciously. Her wound was bandaged, and her coat had been taken off, hanging on the back of the chair beside her. At this moment, the door was opened, and a tall woman wearing sunglasses walked in. "You are. Where is this place?" Qin Yu looked at the woman. She was a little wary, but she didn't show it. After the woman in sunglasses walked in, she pulled a chair next to her and sat down. She took out a notebook and a pen, and began to write on it. Qin Yu looked at her in confusion. She didn't understand why she didn't speak, but started writing. After the woman finished writing a sentence, she raised the notebook and showed it to Qin Yu. "Hello, my name is Yin Xiao. This is the infirmary of Universal Life Base." Qin Yu breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Yin Xiao write that this was the infirmary of Universal Life Base. She looked at the woman with confusion, wondering why she didn't speak. Yin Xiao seemed to understand what she was thinking and wrote, "Sorry, my throat is broken. I can't speak." "Oh, so that's how it is. Were you the one who saved me?" Qin Yu nodded her head in understanding before asking in a concerned manner. She wanted to know if it was this woman who saved her and brought her back to Universal Life Base. She still remembered that her last consciousness stayed in that pitch-black movie theater, where she could not even see her own fingers. Yin Xiao nodded. "Thank you," Qin Yu said from the bottom of her heart, but then looked at Yin Xiao with caution. "But I remember where I was unconscious. It should have been hard to find. How did you?" It wasn't that she doubted Yin Xiao's reason for saving her, but her vigilance was something every zombie hunter in Universal Life Base had to have. Besides, where she was unconscious, if she didn't intentionally look for her, how could she have been found? By accident? How could there be such a coincidence? Chapter 995. Yin Xiao wrote, "I can't tell you, but I'm representing the base. As long as you haven't betrayed us, we have a duty to protect you." When Qin Yu saw her words, she immediately understood. If she hadn't run into people from other bases, then this woman wouldn't have shown up. It sounded like protection, but it was surveillance in disguise. If she agreed to work with Skyfire Base, she'd have to wait until they'd come to an agreement, and she'd sell the information. Then she would be added to the assassination list by the Universal Base. Everyone knew the rules of the base by now. Qin Yu pursed her lips, then asked, "If that's what you say, then what about my team members? I don't think they'd do anything to betray us. Besides, they don't know anything." Yen Zhao's fingers twitched and she wrote, "Don't worry, they're fine. They've seen our tactics, so they need to sign a confidentiality agreement. You'll be their guarantor." Qin Yu paused, then asked, "I understand the need to keep our tactics a secret, but what's with me being their guarantor? I don't know anything, do I?" She hadn't seen the tactics, so why was she needed to be their guarantor? Yen Zhao smiled and wrote, "This is just a double layer of insurance. Don't worry. As long as you keep this a secret, they'll be fine, and you'll be fine." What she meant was to drag Qin Yu into this. She was their captain, and Qin Yu was there to keep them in check. In the future, if her team members wanted to leak the secret of Universal Life Base's zombie control, then they would have to consider Qin Yu's safety. Qin Yu, on the other hand, wouldn't want them to leak the information for her own safety. This was a double layer of insurance. It wasn't to oppress Qin Yu and her team, but it was for the good of the base. This security measure is necessary. Moreover, as long as Qin Yu and the others could properly guard the secret of the base would naturally protect them from being oppressed by other bases. Qin Yu was silent for a moment, then said, "All right, I'll sign. But, can I know the tactics you're talking about? I'm going to be their guarantor, but I don't know what's going on. Don't you think I'm being wronged?" She understood the logic, but the attitude of the woman in front of her was still considered gentle. Qin Yu gradually accepted this situation in her heart. Yen Zhao glanced at her and wrote, "If you are willing to join our army, I can help you apply for this request." Qin Yu was stunned. Army? They were the corpse hunters, and the corpse hunters were free. Just like the mercenaries before the apocalypse, they accepted all kinds of missions from the base. However, this was a voluntary choice, and the initiative was in their hands. However, if he joined the army, then this initiative would become passive. After all, the military's control was very strict, and the missions were all assigned by the higher-ups. Whether you were willing to accept them or not, you had to complete them. Therefore, people who were powerful and liked freedom were not very willing to join the base's army. If it wasn't for this incident, Qin Yu would definitely not have been willing to join the army. But now that she had to sign that damned agreement, everything else was tied to this gay man. If they did not join, they could still live a free life as a corpse hunter. However, he still had to live under the blatant surveillance of others. If they were willing to join the army, although they would be controlled, their status would change. The things he knew were definitely much more than when he was in the corpse hunter team. The more they knew, the clearer they could see the situation they were in the dream. In fact, there were two sides to everything. It was just a matter of which side you were willing to accept. Seeing that Qin Yu's expression was a little resistant, Yen Zhao smiled knowingly. She wrote, "Don't rush to answer, I'll wait for your answer. You can be discharged in 3 days. I'll be waiting for your answer." Saying this, she took out a guarantor agreement from behind her and gave it to Qin Yu. Qin Yu took the agreement and looked at the content. She took the pen that the other party handed over and signed her name on it. After seeing that she signed, Yen Zhao left the ward. On the other side of the inspection department, Mo Qiqi, Dou Yunfan, and Sun Lunan were locked in the same inspection room. Although their freedom was restricted, they were actually treated well. There were 3 clean single beds, and each was equipped with a single table and chair. There was also a bathroom next to it. However, at this time, the 3 of them were not in the mood to care about the environment of the room they were in. Because at this time, besides the 3 of them, there were a few people sitting in the room. Well, no, it was a few zombies. So, do you still have any questions? Alu sat on a chair, leaning against the table, and looking at the 3 of them. Ajio, who was next to them, glared at the 3 of them, looking like he was ready to pounce at any time. There were also 2 level 4 zombies standing at the door. You. Dou Yunfan looked at him in disbelief. The shock and disbelief from before had disappeared. Only Mo Qiqi's face was still cold. From the beginning to the end, only her pupil shrank a little at the beginning. As for Dou Yunfan and Sun Lunan, it was their first time seeing a talking zombie. They were a little stunned. This talking zombie just said a lot of information. They needed some time to calm down. Lu said what he needed to say. In fact, his words were not much different from Yin Zhao's. However, because Emochichi and the others had already seen their identities, Lu directly said it out loud. He stood up, put the 6 agreements on the table and said, "If you want to leave here, it's very simple. After signing these 2 agreements, you can leave. Of course, you can all test my suggestion just now. The treatment of joining the army is also very good." Saying that, he stretched out his hand and pulled Agio, who was about to drool, to the door. The 2 level 4 zombies at the door just closed the door after going out, but did not lock it. Even if it was not locked, for Emochichi and the others, the rows of level 4 zombie guards outside the door were much more effective than the iron lock. Do Yunfan rubbed his face, rubbing away the confusion from before. Then he said, "So this base is actually a zombie base." Sun Lunan was calmer than him, thought for a while and said, "You can say that. But they seem to exist as a protector to the human survivors in the base. This female leader can actually control these high-level zombies. Really not simple." Emochichi walked over and wanted to pick up the agreements, but when her hand was about to touch the paper, she hesitated and stopped. She touched the paper that was taken by the zombie. Would she be infected? Chapter 996. Don't worry, they just want us to join the army, not turn us into zombies. They won't smear a virus on the paper. Sun Lunan noticed Emochichi's action and suddenly smiled. Do Yunfan looked at the door, then sighed and lowered his shoulders. Looks like we can only sign this agreement to get out. Otherwise they won't let us out. This is indeed a big secret for this base. Sun Lunan walked to Emochichi's side and picked up the 2 agreements. As he read, he said, "You should say that they don't want to kill us. They just want us to join the army of this base. That's already being kind to us. If it was any other base, they would probably kill us right outside. After all, death is the safest way to keep a secret." There were 2 agreements in his hand. One was a confidentiality agreement, and the other was an application agreement to join the base's army. Under the application agreement, there was also the position and benefits, etc. Of course, they still needed to undergo special training before they could officially take up the post. Emochichi looked at him and asked blankly, "Do you want to sign it?" Sun Lunan looked at her speechlessly. "If you don't sign it, do you want to stay in this room for the rest of your life?" Emochichi immediately shook her head like a rattle drum. "Then I have no choice but to sign it," Sun Lunan said as he pulled a chair and sat down, then picked up a pen and started to sign his name. Seeing that the captain had signed, Emochichi and Do Yunfan also picked up their 2 agreements to sign. After signing, Sun Lunan took out the agreement between the 3 of them and kept his own copy. Then he took the one belonging to the base to the door and opened it. Looking at the zombies in military uniforms on both sides of the door, Sun Lunan looked at them with a subtle expression. These 2 soldiers were both level 4 zombies with abilities. They stood upright, their uniforms clean, and they were wearing military hats. Only their faces under the brim of the hat were a little scary. Other than that, they looked like soldiers. They had never interacted so harmoniously with a zombie before. After confirming that these zombies really wouldn't attack them, and were even in the same trench as them, Sun Lunan felt that it was a new feeling, but he was still secretly on guard. He looked around, then raised the agreement in his hand and said, "We've signed it. Can we go now?" One of the soldiers at both sides of the door took the agreement, but did not read it. Instead, he directly gestured for him to go outside, and then walked out first. Sun Lunan immediately turned to look at the 2 people behind him and said, "We can go now." The 3 of them followed the zombie soldier out, and soon arrived in front of an iron gate. Outside the door was a security control room. Meanwhile, in the guardhouse, Xiedong was sitting in front of the monitor screen and watching. His upright and tough face was expressionless, but his eyes under the brim of his cap were shining with a dim light. When he heard footsteps, he stood up and walked out of the guard room. Xiedong stood outside the door with his legs crossed and his hands behind his back. He straightened his back and looked at the 3 people walking over with a sharp aura. He first took the agreement from the zombie soldier, who led the way, and looked at it to confirm where the signatures were. Then he said to the three of them, "Welcome to the Army of Life. I am the head coach of the reserve army at the second base Xiedong." As for the reserve army that he mentioned, he was actually referring to the zombie army. Sun Lunen's eyes flashed. He stood in front of Xiedong and held out his hand. "Hello, I am Sun Lunen." Do Yunfan was the second to speak. "Actually, I think you should already know our names, but let me introduce myself. Do Yunfan." Emochichi spat out two words coldly. Emochichi. Xiedong shook hands with Sun Lunen and smiled at Do Yunfan as he nodded. Sun Lunen looked around and suddenly asked, "Are these the reserve army at the second base that you were talking about? They are all zombies?" He didn't say the last two words, but Xiedong knew what he was referring to. Xiedong nodded and took off his cap. "Actually, so am I." When he appeared in the base, no one thought anything of it. Anyway, he had a human face, and his eyes did not turn black. As long as they weren't zombies, no one would be able to discover his true identity. After he took off his cap, the whites of his eyes were suddenly eroded by darkness. Sun Lunen and the other two were stunned and looked at him in disbelief. Xiedong closed his eyes and his eyes returned to normal. He then said, "Don't worry, you have joined the First Army. That is under Deputy Leader Yuan's jurisdiction, not ours. After you leave today, there should be someone to bring you to the army tomorrow." Sun Lunen and Do Yunfan looked at each other, then turned to look at Emochichi. Then he nodded at Xiedong. Only then did Xiedong turn his body slightly and point outside. After the three of them left, there would naturally be a car to send them back to the first base. After Xiedong returned to his office, he saw Yin Xiao, Alu, Jing Yan and the others sitting on the sofa in his office. Everyone had a few agreements in their hands. "How is Qinyu?" Xiedong walked to his desk and sat down, looking at Yin Xiao and asking. Yin Xiao stood up and walked to his desk, placing the signed agreements on his desk. She wrote on the notebook, "Her attitude seems to be developing well. I gave her 3 days to consider. It's not a big problem." Xiedong nodded, picking up her agreement and flipping through it. After collecting the agreements, Xiedong began to write the post-battle report. The next day, when Lin Xiao was sitting in the office feeding Xiaotingting milk, Xiedong came over with the report. "Come in, put the report on my desk." Lin Xiao felt his presence approaching and said casually without looking up, "Yes." Over at Haiqing, Wu Qingyue, Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui were discussing how to guard against China's plans. But recently, China had been very quiet, which made Wu Qingyue and the other two feel that China's plans were not small. Why is China so calm? What is Si Gongchen trying to do? Are they just going to suppress this conflict? Xiao Yunlong frowned, unable to understand Si Gongchen's intentions. Maybe he's just afraid that a little impatience will ruin the big plan. But we don't know what their intentions are for now. Recently, a lot of China's intelligence network has been broken, and Si Gongchen is also secretly cleaning up spies and undercover agents. Wu Qingyue had a faint smile on his face, but the corners of his mouth curled up habitually, but his eyes did not narrow. "Isn't this very disadvantageous for us?" Xiao Yunlong said. Wu Qingyue said, "I think he's going to eliminate the possibility of leaking information before he starts to act." Zhou Shihui nodded. "I agree with this point." Chapter 997. After the three people finished talking about business, Xiao Yunlong looked at Wu Qingyue speechlessly and asked, "I say, you even gave birth to a son. Why can't you get his mother? I have never seen a wife as frustrated as you." Speaking of this matter, Zhou Shihui's expressionless face had a little smile. "Can you bring him back for us to see during the full moon? In any case, he is your son, the young master of our base." Wu Qingyue said helplessly, "Isn't it easy for you to see him? Can't you just go directly to the base? If you want her to bring the child over, I think Sai." As he spoke, he showed an indescribable bitter expression. When these two people knew about this matter, their expressions at that time were still fresh in his memory. At that time, these two people's eyes almost popped out. At first, they didn't believe it at all. After knowing the truth, they looked at him like they were looking at a monkey. Xiao Yunlong was dumbfounded as he said, "No. I never knew you had this ability. You can even get a zombie to give birth to a child. And although Zhou Shihui was a little older, his eyes were directly staring at a certain indescribable position of his. Then he asked, "Why didn't you become a zombie?" Wu Qingyue at that time thought, "I." As a result, he later learned that he had successfully slept with her, and the child was born. However, the other party still didn't agree to accept him, and the two people immediately despised him. Xiao Yunlong saw him say so and said, "In any case, you are the child's father. The child's full moon banquet must be held in our sea city." Although they couldn't let the whole base know that their leader had a son, at least they could still invite several tables of relatives, friends, subordinates, and so on. Wu Qingyue said with some embarrassment, "I don't think she will be willing." That female zombie was so possessive of her son, and now she had returned to her original attitude towards him. He really felt that the other party would not agree to this request. How do you know it's impossible before you try? Don't be so timid, that is your son, you have this right, okay? Xiao Yunlong somewhat disliked Wu Qingyue like this, and immediately said with a straight face. Zhou Shihui also said, "At least try first. If it doesn't work, we'll steal the child." The smile on Wu Qingyue's face cracked a little. He twitched his mouth and looked at him. "I can't believe you can say such a thing with a straight face." Zhou Shihui covered his face with his hand and coughed. Then he looked up at the ceiling. In fact, he very much agreed with what Xiao Yunlong said. But looking at Wu Qingyue's current situation, where he couldn't bear to hurt the female zombie, he certainly couldn't convince the female zombie to agree to this matter. But that was their sea city's little crown prince. How could they hold a 1-month celebration in someone else's base? Not even her maiden family. Besides, could the child really speak? It was said that their thinking was more mature, unlike ordinary babies. That was amazing. Could it be that he had been transmigrated? When Xiao Yunlong heard this, his expression immediately changed and he laughed. "Hey, that's a good idea. I don't have to face them head-on." When Wu Qingyue saw their expressions, he had a bad feeling in his heart. He quickly said, "I'll test her first. Maybe she doesn't really care where the banquet is held." He didn't have much confidence in the last sentence. Based on his understanding of the female zombie, this was impossible. But in order to prevent these two men from doing anything strange, he could only say so. "Then hurry up. You must fight for this opportunity. Think about it, if the child can come over here, then his mother will definitely come over. Then you will also have a chance to seduce her heart, isn't it?" Xiao Yunlong leaned against the back of the chair and helped him come up with ideas. Although Wu Qingyue felt that it was unlikely that the female zombie would come over, but when he heard Xiao Yunlong's words, his heart was also a little moved. "Okay, then I'll leave it to you. Be sure to bring the child back for us to see." Zhou Shihui stood up and looked at him as he left. Xiao Yunlong also got up and left with his information. After Wu Qingyue returned to his office, his mind was still thinking about how to make the female zombie agree to bring the child to Sea City. However, before he could think of a way, Xiao Liqing came in with new information. "Leader, there's a new situation at the Universal Base." Wu Qingyue looked at him. "What's the situation?" Xiao Liqing explained. 2 days ago, 3,000-strong Skyfire Base soldiers showed up about 50 kilometers to the west of Universal. They began to hunt down Universal's zombie hunters. But yesterday, Xie Dong brought 300 soldiers with him and annihilated them. The survivors that were rescued signed confidentiality agreements and asked them to join the base's army. Wu Qingyue's smile was faint, but his eyes were cold. He opened his mouth to ask, "Did anyone escape?" Xiao Liqing shook his head. "No, they were all wiped out." Wu Qingyue nodded. "It looks like our falling out with China has made Skyfire Base restless. But there are too few humans in the base, and on the surface they're weak. They can't show their true strength, so they should be recruiting in large numbers." Xiao Liqing nodded. "That's true. Some of the survivors from Hidden Cloud City and Earth Dragon were willing to go to Universal Base, but the giant rat swarm has made them think it's not safe. The people from Hidden Cloud City and Earth Dragon scattered. Those with a bit of strength were willing to go to China or Haiqing, while those who didn't want to go too far went to the nearest Skyfire Base. Now that Wuxia and Haiqing had fallen out, those people would consider the strength of Wuxia and Haiqing. Which side would be able to give them a stable life, and which side would continue to fall into a passive, or even suppressed situation. But for now it looked like China was still the strongest. Haiqing wasn't weak, but compared to China it was still a little weaker. At least when it came to technological weaponry, they were much weaker. Fortunately, each side had an 8th level adept to hold down the fort, so a delicate balance was maintained. Wu Qingyue smirked. If they knew there were subterranean creatures, they'd be even less likely to go to Universal Base. After saying that, he thought to himself, could it be that these underground creatures really only exist in the area not far away from the base? Were there no other places? If that was the case, then Universal Base was out of luck. Was this a miscalculation on the zombie girl's part? He didn't know if the female zombie regretted building the base there. Perhaps she should have built it in the south. Xiao Liqing's voice was worried. If we don't deal with the subterranean creatures soon, Universal Base is going to suffer. It'd be a shame to destroy a newly built base. Chapter 998. Wu Qingyue's and Xiao Liqing's worries soon came true. Over 10 days after Xie Dong and his subordinates had wiped out Skyfire's 3,000-strong army, the sun had just set, and the sky was just beginning to darken. Not far from where El Mar and her zombies were stationed, 5 holes, each 7 meters in diameter, opened up. El Mar and the rest of the zombies in the army immediately smelled a strong earthy smell coming from that direction, and it was coming from several directions. She immediately led a few level 6 zombie kings to investigate, but when they arrived, they found that there was more than one hole. The holes were very quiet, but the movement was not small. Countless underworld creatures that looked like adult gorillas crawled out of the ground silently. There were close to 100 underworld creatures standing around the cave entrance. Soon, the zombie kings that were sent to investigate the other holes immediately came back with news. A large number of underground creatures also came out of those holes, and the positions of the 5 holes were arranged in the direction of the Universal Base. The hole closest to the Universal Base was at least 30 kilometers away from the first hole, but it was only 20 kilometers away from the Universal Base. It was obvious that the target of these things was very clear. Bring this situation back to inform the leader immediately. Hurry! Prepare for battle. Earth-type, first think of a way to block those holes. El Mar returned to the temporary military base and quickly ordered 5 groups of zombies to go to the holes, and then began to gather the nearby zombies to block the spread of these creatures. Roar dash at this time, a dull roar of a beast came from afar. El Mar was shocked. Lin Xiao, Yuan Tianxing, Lin Feng, Qiu Lili, and the other level 7 metahumans and zombies in the Universal Base also stopped moving, and then looked in that direction. Far away in Haiqing, Wu Qingyue, Xiao Yunlong, and Zhou Shihui all felt something, but because they were too far away, only the stronger Wu Qingyue could feel it clearly, and he also felt that this pressure was somewhat familiar. After thinking about it, his expression suddenly changed. At this time, the underground creatures that were surrounded by the zombie horde began to turn red. They all entered berserk mode and began to attack the surrounding zombie horde indiscriminately. The 5 holes within a kilometer radius of a mile instantly became a battlefield of zombies and monsters. Roar, roar, roar. Roar, roar, roar. Alright, the roars from both sides could not be understood by normal humans. Damn it. I was wondering why these guys had been so quiet for so long. So you were waiting here. El Mar appeared at the cave entrance closest to the Universal Base. She gritted her teeth and cursed. She dashed down in a flash and sliced off the heads of several low-level gorillas with a few swipes of her claws. He didn't expect the underworld creatures to launch a surprise attack and hide so well. There was no movement at all. But suddenly 5 holes were dug out. Roar! A 5-meter-tall giant gorilla rushed out and pounced on El Mar like a bull, waving its claws. At the same time, his whole body shone with a red light, and the sharp teeth in his mouth shone with a sharp light in the night. Bang! The berserk creature's speed and strength increased tremendously. Its claw struck El Mar and sent her flying. Ugh! Puff! Elmar felt a tightness in her chest as a fishy and salty liquid gushed out of her mouth. She spat out a mouthful of thick black zombie blood. However, Elmar's body crashed into the wall of a house. She quickly rushed out of the house that had a hole in it. At the same time, a small portion of these underworld creatures were ordered to guard the cave entrance, to prevent the entrance from being destroyed. Therefore, when Elmar ordered the Earth-type zombies to rush over and use their abilities to block the entrance, they would be targeted and attacked by several underworld creatures. Even if they were far away, they would still be targeted. A 10-meter-tall giant gorilla crawled out of the cave that Elmar was in. It stood motionless facing the universal base, but its nose kept sniffing in that direction. Behind it, there was a continuous flow of different-sized gorillas. The other 4 cave entrances quickly stopped, and the underworld creatures continued to pour out. However, there were 400 to 500 of them, and there were 2 level 7 gorillas at each entrance. They attacked the level 5 or level 6 zombies that Elmar sent out. There weren't many level 6 zombies on Elmar's side. Old Mengua, Old 8, Old 3, Xiatian, and Nanjing were 5 level 1 kings, and each of them had 10 level 5 leaders to attack. As soon as its aura appeared, Lin Xiao in the universal base had a bad feeling. He immediately changed into his combat uniform and put his son into Shin Yuzhen's arms. Send him to Lin Hao. Son, go to uncle's place first. Mama will go out for a while. Little Tung Tung looked at her and calmly waved his hand. Go. Little Tung Tung, who was about to be 1 month old, was no longer as soft as when he was just born. Although he was still very short, he was very capable. Lin Xiao went out with Duan Wan and sent people to give urgent military orders to Xie Dong and Yuan Tianqing. Then he drove out of the base in a hurry. At the entrance of the cave closest to the universal base, there was still a continuous flow of underworld creatures. While Elmar was being tortured by a crazy level 7 gorilla, the cave entrance was already surrounded by a large number of underworld creatures. In addition to the 2 level 7 gorillas that were fighting Elmar and Xiatian, there were even 5 that were quietly standing behind the huge figure that was 10 meters tall. This level 8 underground gorilla was like a leader. Roar! It seemed to have sensed something. The leader of the gorillas suddenly bared its teeth, raised its head and roared. It seemed to have issued an order. Then it lowered its body and leaped up again. It jumped out in the direction of the universal base. As soon as it moved, the underworld creatures that were quietly standing around immediately chased after it. One by one, their bodies exploded with red light, reflecting a bright light in the night. Oh no! After Elmar dodged the claw of the level 7 underground creature, she saw the huge underground creature leading thousands of underworld creatures towards the universal base. He immediately called out subconsciously. At the same time, she prayed that these creatures might get lost and might not be able to reach the universal base that was 20 to 30 kilometers away. If these creatures really rushed into the universal base, it would be a disaster. She didn't know if it was because the number of the underworld creatures was too large and their aura was too strong. The rats on the other side of the rat hole in the distance all ran back at this time. They all looked frightened and hurriedly went into the hole. Chapter 999. Lin Xiao drove the car out of the base and stopped when it was halfway to where Elmar was stationed. She put away the car and jumped onto the tall building next to her. She found a place with a wider view and looked at the countless red lights getting closer and closer. She breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, before she left, she gave Lin Feng an urgent order to send someone to escort Lin Hao and the 3 children, Lin Xiaolu, Tong Tong, and Little Tung Ting, out of the base and go to High City to hide. Shoo shoo shoo. A few figures appeared next to her. Chiu Lily, Lin Kuei, and all the level 1 king zombies in the base appeared. Lin Kuei was urgently called back by Lin Xiao a few days ago, but Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying hadn't returned yet. The 2 of them, Lung Xiantong and Kong Qingming from Haicheng, were still at Lake Tai, looking for those stones and studying the medicinal value of the mutated plants. How did they get here? So close, and there are so many of them. Chiu Lily's red eyes widened and said in surprise. because those things were too close to the base. Lin Xiao stared at the front and said to them, "They are now in a frenzied state. Their speed, strength, and defense are all very powerful. Be careful. Don't fight recklessly if you can't beat them." "What about you? You're not thinking of fighting that big guy, are you? It doesn't look like it's easy to deal with." Qiu Lily heard the hidden meaning in her words and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao was obviously asking them to find someone they could deal with. As for those they couldn't, "Don't worry, my ability is very useful to them. I will think of a way to deal with that level 8 zombie. If it really doesn't work, then find someone to go to Haiqing to find Wu Qingyue." Lin Xiao squinted her eyes and released a black flame from her palm. She believed that if they couldn't resist those things at the end, Wu Qingyue could at least buy some time for the survivors to escape. But at that time, the base she had built would probably be destroyed again. As someone who always wanted to rely on herself, Lin Xiao really didn't want that to happen. She didn't want to ask Wu Qingyue for help at this time. At least before she could fight, she didn't want to rely on anyone. The last sentence was the last decision she made for the survivors in the base. The black sparks turned into a black lotus on her palm. After twisting a few times, they suddenly split apart and turned into several black fire snakes that flew out. These fire snakes continued to split into small black snakes in the dark night air, and then rushed towards the endless red light ahead. After giving birth to little Tung Tung, he had been recovering for more than 20 days. Lin Xiao's ability had recovered to about 80% of its original power, although it was not completely restored. However, it was still possible to support a few large-scale releases of arcana energy. When Lin Xiao and the rest of the zombies appeared, the charging underworld creatures stopped. Moreover, when Lin Xiao released the fire snake, they instinctively took a step back. Roar! The leader of the underground gorilla stopped and immediately let out a low warning sound. Lin Xiao narrowed his eyes when he saw that his ability had such a deterrent effect. Then he ordered, "Apart from one level 8, there are still 5 level 7. Lily, you deal with one, and Lin Kuei with the other. As for the others, try to avoid those above level 7. Qiu Lily might not be able to defeat these level 7 underground creatures when they were in berserk mode. Fortunately, they had an advantage as zombies. As long as they didn't lose their limbs or head, it wouldn't cause much harm to them. In other words, they could take a beating." Lin Xiao leaped out and rushed towards the leader of the underground gorilla, and the few level 7 gorillas beside it. She remembered that she had burned a level 7 underground gorilla to death with just a small wisp of her special ability flame. At the same time, she realized that these creatures didn't disperse their formation. Just like that, they rushed over in a group, and these things did not even intend to hide themselves. They were like walking monster lanterns. When Lin Xiao's figure flashed, she appeared next to the huge underground gorilla in the blink of an eye. She threw a small black fireball at the head of a level 7 gorilla. At the same time, she released a black fog that began to surround the huge gorilla. Roar dash! The gorilla that was surrounded by the black fog wasn't stupid. Although it couldn't see, it could vaguely feel the energy in the black fog. Thus, he immediately bounced his leg and jumped to a place 20 to 30 meters away with a bang. Lin Xiao appeared with her black hellfire, causing the originally calm monster army to become a little chaotic. They tried to avoid Lin Xiao's flame, and they seemed to be panicking. But how could Lin Xiao's black flame be so easy to avoid? Her flame was like the flame of the netherworld that leaked out from the netherworld, and it chased after the underground creatures with a cold spirituality. Roar dash! One of the 3 level 7 gorillas couldn't dodge in time, and the small black fireball that Lin Xiao threw at it caught up to it. Then, it quickly exploded into small flames on its head, and they all drilled into its mouth, nose, and ears. Bang dash! At this time, a slender figure suddenly appeared and was thrown to the ground like a puppet. "Cough, you're finally here. If you didn't come, I would really be crippled." Elmar's tone started to become a little rough. She climbed up from the ground. One of her legs was slightly twisted, and it seemed to be fractured. Her whole body was covered in blood, and her forehead was full of zombie blood. The pupils in the middle of her dark eyes were like 2 emeralds that emitted green light, like a ghost in the night. She coughed out a small pool of blood as she spoke. Hua Mingming, you're so miserable. Although Qiu Lily screamed in disgust, her figure instantly flashed to Elmar's side. She pulled her back again, and quickly disappeared from the spot. Poof! An underground gorilla the size of a buffalo fiercely pounced on the place where the two of them left. Its steel claws made two 30 to 40 centimeter holes on the ground. Lin Xiao flashed to the top of a tall building, waved her hands, and began to concentrate on controlling the dark fire that she released. In addition to the black mist that targeted the level 8 gorillas, Lin Xiao waved a few more black flames towards the other level 7 gorillas on the field. There were a total of 7 level 7 gorillas here. Originally, Elmar was holding off one, and the other was blocked by the level 6 zombie Summer for a while. Fortunately, Summer was a rarely seen physical type zombie, and his body was much more durable than Elmar's animal type zombie. But no matter what, his level was still one level lower than Elmar, so his fate was even worse. Although he wasn't dead, he could only lie down and couldn't move at this time. His whole body was tattered, and his tall and strong body was also covered in the zombie blood of the virus. His chest had collapsed, and his stomach was burst, and his intestines were exposed to the air. His limbs were strangely twisted as he lay in a deep hole. He could only blink his eyes and helplessly look at the sky. Chapter 1000. Lin Xiao's black fire snake adhered to every underground creature that she stared at. Whether it was a level 7 creature the size of a buffalo, a level 6 creature the size of a cow, or even a large number of level 5 gorillas the size of an adult gorilla, Lin Xiao controlled the death fire snake to enter their bodies through their mouths, noses, and ears. Roar! Woo! Soon, these underground gorillas that were hit by Lin Xiao's ability immediately began to go crazy. They covered their heads or scratched their chests and stomachs. It was as if they were poisoned. Roar! Hearing the manic roars of her subordinates, the level 8 underground gorilla also began to go crazy. It immediately turned its face to the roof where Lin Xiao was, and its aura directly condensed into a killing intent. The killing intent of a level 8 beast was the same as the killing intent of a level 8 zombie emperor. If one was not strong enough, they would be directly suppressed to the point that their whole body would be filled with fear, and then they would lose their minds. If they were weak, they would be directly scared to death. However, Lin Xiao herself was a strange zombie. She was not afraid of the pressure and killing intent that came from a higher level than her. Therefore, she was not afraid of the killing intent of this level 8 underground beast, although she was fully alert. She pursed her lips, suddenly raised her head and roared. Roar! Come over here. Lin Xiao's voice was loud and clear, and the sound waves spread far and wide. Immediately, all the zombies within 50 miles woke up from their state of hibernation. One by one, they raised their heads to look in Lin Xiao's direction, and then began to walk in her direction. As they walked suddenly, there was a second call from a level 2 zombie king. Roar! Speed up! Therefore, the zombies that were originally walking immediately began to run, stumbling as they rushed in that direction. Although Lin Xiao was a level 2 zombie, her pressure was almost on the same level as that of a zombie emperor. Of course, it was still slightly weaker than a real zombie emperor, but it was much stronger than a normal level 2 king, and the pressure was also much greater. When the base was built, Lin Xiao used the zombies as a line of defense, so the low-level zombies around the base were not eliminated in large numbers. Therefore, according to Lin Xiao's previous estimation, the total population of Uptown and Binjiang District would be at least 600,000. Therefore, excluding the original 10% of survivors, there would be 500,000 zombies left. Furthermore, there were other factors that needed to be eliminated. Right now, Lin Xiao's current location was at the border between Uptown and Binjiang District. Adding both sides together, Lin Xiao could summon at least hundreds of thousands of ordinary zombies. So to put it simply, just like Mo Yen, Lin Xiao started to create a zombie horde. Since these things that came out from the underground were so good at fighting, she would just use the human wave tactic. They were going to be buried by the zombies. After Lin Xiao issued 2 summoning sounds, He immediately focused on dealing with the underground creatures that were above level 5. As for the others, she was in charge of restraining the most powerful ones. Let the others deal with the rest. After all, she had brought a team here. After Chio Lily took Elmar away, the crater on the other side also appeared in the direction of Summer. When he saw Summer's situation, his expression was exactly the same as Chio Lily's when she saw Elmarch. Wah, big guy. I've never seen you in such a miserable state. Crater squatted beside the crater where Summer was, looking at the male zombie whose body was in a terrible state. Can you stop talking nonsense? If you want to save someone, then hurry up. Summer looked at her quietly and said weakly. Crater immediately jumped into the crater. When he bent down, he made a few postures and looked him up and down. Then he said, "Looks like you're not suitable to be carried like this. Let's not talk about the blood on your stomach. We'll have to worry about your intestines falling out." So, that was why Summer, who was almost 1.9 meters tall, was princess carried by this slender girl who was only 1.65 meters tall. He calmly jumped up and returned to the back of their camp. At the same time, he didn't forget to say, how much energy from the lake did the leader spend to bathe and drink you? And without 3 to 5 months, your stomach won't even grow out. They all knew the effect of the energy in Lin Xiao's lake. That was why they followed her peacefully. Although they were forced to at first, they had long regarded Mo Yen as their former leader. Former leader Summer. Being carried like a princess was enough to make him speechless. Thinking of his injuries, Summer, who was 1.9 meters tall, felt very tired. Aren't you pretty good at taking hits? You actually got beaten up like this. These damn things are really scary. In the blink of an eye, he brought Summer back to his own camp. Crater muttered, but his hands didn't stop moving. He took a pile of sand cloth and wrapped Summer into a mummy. He even took out the energy lake that Lin Xiao had stored in a medicine bottle and fed it to him. You'll know when you try, Summer said the mummy. However, after Crater settled Summer down, she turned around to find a level 6 gorilla to fight. The gorilla didn't have time to care about her. Looking at the underground creature that only cared about grabbing his head, Crater easily trapped the gorilla in a big water ball. However, this thing wasn't afraid of water at all. It struggled vigorously in the water ball, but didn't seem to be suffocating. It just kept scratching its own head. And the eyeless head had already been badly scratched by itself. This guy was about to scratch himself to death. On the other side, Nanjing was also using a large amount of ice ability on a level 6 gorilla. However, she couldn't freeze it. Crater Pit extended its hand and released an icy mist. The icy mist shrouded the level 6 underground gorilla. A layer of ice immediately formed on the surface of its body, turning it into an ice sculpture. If an ordinary person was frozen like this, a touch would shatter them into pieces. Even if a psychic was frozen by her, although the other party wouldn't shatter into pieces, he would definitely lose consciousness or be unable to move. The underworld creature was frozen by Pit's level 6 ice element. But in less than 2 seconds there was a palm sound and her ice shattered. However, that gorilla was still alive. However, this gorilla was different from the one that Crater dealt with. It wasn't grabbing its head but its stomach. It was already badly scratched, and its intestines were even pulled out. In fact, these underground creatures that were affected by Lin Xiao's ability had all lost their aggressiveness. For the zombies, they were just targets that couldn't resist. What was more infuriating was that they couldn't kill this target. At this moment, Chio Lily's fire tornado swept a level 7 gorilla into the sky. Although it couldn't be burned to death, it might fall to its death? Bang! Then well, it didn't die. Chapter 1001. Falling from a height of tens of meters, the powerful gravity caused the underground creature, which was as large as a buffalo, to crash into the ground and create a large pit. Moreover, when the underground creature crashed into the pit, there was no sign of its body being torn apart. The underground gorilla rolled around in the pit and got up again. Chio Lily's attack didn't have any effect on it, but she didn't intend to give up. The fire couldn't kill it, the wind blade couldn't hurt it, and it didn't die even after falling from a height of tens of meters. Let's try a few hundred meters high. If the first time didn't work, let's try the second time. Chill Lily stared at the underground gorilla that crawled out of the pit and used its claws to scratch her. She continued to use the tornado to sweep it up. On the other side, the level 8 underground gorilla looked at the surrounding subordinates that were suffering from Lin Xiao's hellfire. It roared angrily at Lin Xiao. Roar! Then it broke through the black fog controlled by Lin Xiao and leaped toward the building where Lin Xiao was. The building where Lin Xiao was located was only 20 to 30 floors, which wasn't very high. The huge underground gorilla leaped up. The 10-meter-tall beast that weighed at least 2 tons landed on the roof with a bang and immediately cracked and caved in the platform. However, when it arrived at the top of the building, it found that its target had disappeared from where it stood. It roared angrily and continued to chase in Lin Xiao's direction. Of course, Lin Xiao didn't intend to fight the beast head-on. She needed to focus all her energy on controlling her ability. Only when she temporarily restrained the level 5, level 6, and level 7 underground creatures could Chill Lily and the rest have a slight chance of killing these high-level underground creatures. This way, the situation wouldn't be one-sided. Roar! The surrounding zombies rushed up and pounced on the lowest level of the underground gorilla to bite. Of course, they couldn't bite through it, but at least they temporarily restrained these creatures. After the hellfire drilled into the bodies of these creatures, it began to devour the energy in their bodies. After the energy was absorbed, Lin Xiao's hellfire could devour the bodies of these creatures. This was because the energy evolution of these underground creatures was all in their bodies. Every cell or every bone was filled with energy transformed from the virus. This was a great supplement for Lin Xiao's special ability. Soon the level 5 underworld creatures couldn't withstand Lin Xiao's devour ability. His movements began to slow down, and he was pushed down by the zombies. Poochie, a level 5 gorilla's movements became sluggish, and when it was hit by a fire-type zombie leader's fireball, it actually started burning. The zombie leader was pleasantly surprised, and immediately increased the temperature of the flames. The underground gorilla was burnt to a crisp. A wisp of black flame leaped out from his red flames, and quickly found its next target. When the zombie leader saw Lin Xiao's black flame, it immediately understood what was going on. He immediately followed the wisp of flame, and waited for it to drill into the next underground gorilla. Then, he immediately rushed up to attack that underground gorilla. Lin Xiao diverted her attention to control the hellfire. At the same time, she could feel the changes that occurred after the hellfire absorbed the energy of the underground creatures. For example, the hellfire that she controlled to drill into the bodies of the level 5 creatures was thinner than her pinky finger. After absorbing the energy of a level 5 creature, the hellfire was as thick as an index finger. The energy absorption of the underground creatures below level 5 was the fastest. After all, only the level 5 creatures had died in the 2 minutes of battle. As for the level 6 and level 7 creatures, even if their heads and bodies were smashed, they still weren't dead. She remembered that the last time she killed a level 7 creature, it took at least 10 minutes before it died. But the absorbed energy couldn't make up for the energy she had consumed. Her attack efficiency increased a little. Lin Xiao's special ability controlled a large number of high-level underground creatures. This made the level 8 gorilla angry, and it was harassed by Lin Xiao's black mist. It couldn't effectively approach Lin Xiao. This made it very irritable. Roar! The level 8 zombie roared and suddenly bent its body slightly. Its skin began to crack, and a dazzling red light seeped out from the cracks on its body. A violent and oppressive aura rose from its body. Chill Lily and the others couldn't help but stop, and even lose control of their movements. Even Lin Xiao felt her heart tighten. She felt that her chi was completely locked, and a strong sense of crisis arose in her heart. Just as this extremely bad premonition arose in her heart, her body instinctively flashed away in the blink of an eye. She was still in the control of her special ability, and couldn't be invisible, so she could only dodge. But her movements were still a little too late. At the same time, she suddenly felt a chill on her back. Before she could react, her body had been slapped away. Bang boom. Cough. Before she could react, Lin Xiao had smashed into the mutant tree next to her. The trunk of the tree, which was half a meter in diameter, was directly smashed, and the entire tree toppled over. Hua hua! As soon as she fell to the ground, she saw the big tree directly pressing down on her. Lin Xiao quickly rolled and then jumped. When the tree was pressing down, she quickly flashed out. Just as she rushed out, she was blocked by the huge monster with flashing red cracks all over its body. A huge claw slashed down at her head again at lightning speed. Lin Xiao reacted quickly and suddenly twisted her body. Then, she kicked the monster's body and did a somersault. After nimbly dodging the giant claw, she then used the force of the kick to bounce back. At the same time, she waved her hand, and a black flame flashed like a spirit snake. It quickly drilled into the nose of the level 8 underground gorilla. Roar! With something in its nose, the level 8 underground gorilla immediately panicked and took a step back. At the same time, it opened its mouth and sneezed a few times. Poochie! While sneezing, the level 8 giant beast anxiously patted its nose with its claws. It even used its nose to exhale a few times. At this time, Lin Xiao had already retreated to a high-voltage telephone pole, more than 20 meters away. Fortunately, her body was strong enough. Being slapped by the opponent and knocking down the tree was nothing. It was just that her chest felt a little stuffy. She clutched her chest, not because she was feeling unwell, but because when the giant claw hit her, it tore her clothes. There was nothing more depressing for a woman than having her clothes torn during a fight. Chapter 1002. Lin Xiao quickly took off her coat and quickly took out a pair of underwear from her space. She dodged the level 8 gorilla and put it on nimbly, buttoning 2 buttons in front of her chest. At this moment, the level 8 gorilla's body suddenly trembled, followed by a strange caw-caw-caw cough. Lin Xiao saw a black gas spurt out from its nose, and then the flame she threw into its nose just now disappeared. Puff puff puff. After the black gas spurted out, the level 8 gorilla wasn't done. It then spat out a few mouthfuls of dirty black saliva. After the saliva hit the ground, the flowers, grass, stones, and sand on the ground melted, forming a hole. Lin Xiao thought to herself, "Motherfucker, a few mouthfuls of saliva dissolved my attack? Do you have to slap my face like that?" Roar! After releasing Lin Xiao's flame, the level 8 creature immediately pounced at Lin Xiao again. Its huge body wasn't clumsy at all, and its speed increased to a terrifying level that Lin Xiao couldn't dodge in time. Lin Xiao immediately dodged and disappeared on the spot. In the eyes of others, they could only see the moving silhouette of Lin Xiao and the level 8 beast. Lin Xiao had to divert her attention to control a large amount of flame to absorb the energy of the other underground creatures, while dodging the level 8 zombie's attack. Therefore, the flame she threw out just now contained too little energy, which was why it didn't have much effect on the level 8 underground creature. Bang! Boom! The level 8 underground creature chased after Lin Xiao with a violent momentum. In the blink of an eye, it was right in front of Lin Xiao, its 2 giant claws carrying a chilling and sharp aura attacking her. Lin Xiao made a quick turn and barely dodged the claw swinging down from his opponent. Puff puff puff. The sharp force of the claws actually cut down the rocks and trees several meters away within the range of the claw's trajectory. Being chased by the dangerous level 8 underground creature, Lin Xiao could only temporarily give up on controlling the flame. The nether fire stopped devouring the energy in the bodies of the other underworld creatures. It lay dormant in their bodies temporarily. Without the engulfment of Lin Xiao's dark flame, the other level 6 and 7 creatures immediately recovered. They then turned around and started attacking the surrounding zombies. Roar! The level 7 underground creature that was swept 200 meters up by Chiu Lily suddenly adjusted its posture in mid-air and roared furiously. Bang! The creature landed on the ground, its legs landing firmly on the ground. It directly smashed the cement floor into a depression, but its figure stood steadily and walked out. He sniffed in Chiu Lily's direction and immediately locked onto her position. What did these guys eat to grow up? They can't even die from falling. Chiu Lily was also very irritated. She became even more irritated when she saw the underground gorilla that was as big as a buffalo suddenly change its expression and lock onto her. I want to see what you can do to me. She glared angrily at the ugly underground creature and swayed her body to the sky. She looked down at the level 7 underground creature. Roar! As expected, the level 7 underground gorilla suddenly looked up at Chiu Lily's figure in the sky and roared angrily. It squatted and leaped onto the lamppost at the side. Then it bounced onto the tall building beside it and quickly climbed to the top of the building. Chiu Lily retreated and rose another height, creating a distance of more than 100 meters between her and the underground creature on the top of the building. Even though Chiu Lily was in front of it, the level 7 underground gorilla could only roar at Chiu Lily unwillingly. It couldn't be helped as the enemy's position was too high. No matter how strong its jumping ability was, it couldn't jump more than 100 meters. Moreover, Chiu Lily was high up in the sky, where the airflow was several times faster than on the ground. Hence, Chiu Lily's scent faded and almost disappeared. The level 7 gorilla quickly gave up the idea of attacking Chiu Lily. Then it stood on the top of the building and looked left and right. It realized that there was no enemy worthy of it. So it lifted its head and stared in the direction of the base. Then it leaped down from the corner of the building and dived in the direction of the base. Roar! Suddenly, there was a roar of a beast, and a black shadow flashed in the dark night. When the underworld creature landed, it blocked the way to the human base. The huge black panther's entire body was covered in glossy and smooth black fur. In the dark night, only a pair of glowing pupils flashed. It was supposed to be like that. However, there were a few deep claw marks on the back of the black panther, and black blood stained its black fur. Lin Kuei's eyes flashed fiercely. He bared his teeth and roared at the underground creature that was glowing in red light. Roar! The underground gorilla seemed to understand the warning in his roar and responded. However, its voice was full of disdain and even provoked Lin Kuei. Oh. Lin Kuei's black panther was already showing its teeth. After hearing the opponent provoking it, its facial features contorted into a more sinister and terrifying expression. It bent its front limbs slightly and lowered its body. It stared at the opponent while its tail swayed rhythmically from side to side. This was the movement of a feline before launching an attack. Just as the two beasts confronted each other, a level 7 underground gorilla dashed out from the side. It waved its claws at Lin Kuei's big black panther, without a care in the world. Whoosh bang! The black panther leaped back quickly and nimbly avoided the sneak attack of the level 7 underground creature. However, after he avoided the first one, another pounced on him in mid-air. Seeing that the big black panther was about to be slashed by the gleaming claws, Lin Kuei only had time to twist his body in mid-air to avoid his vital parts. At this moment, a tornado suddenly appeared from the side and swept him away. In the next second, the black panther was swept to the rooftop of a nearby building while Chiu Lily appeared beside him. The leader seems to be in danger, Chiu Lily said with a frown as she watched the battle between Lin Xiao and the level 8 underground creature. The black panther turned its head to take a look. If the leader hadn't suddenly stopped controlling the abilities, these underground creatures wouldn't have recovered so suddenly. Without her restraints, these creatures had no scruples. Chapter 1003. Black Panther looked quietly in Lin Xiao's direction, but at that moment, a paw suddenly reached out and stroked his head twice. Wow! You're a shapeshifter adept. So cute. Big cat. Chiu Lily's eyes lit up as she looked at Lin Kuei's furry head. She rubbed her hands over it a few more times. Chiu Lily didn't want to let go of the soft fur. She liked animals as well, but her hobby was different from other girls. Others liked small animals, but she liked big ones. It was big and wild, but it was strangely cute. But in the pre-apocalyptic world, big wild animals were rare. Even if you saw one, you might not be able to touch it. So when she saw the panther, she couldn't tell who Lin Kuei was from his aura. She thought it was a wild mutant panther. But if they knew each other, it would be great. They could directly touch them. She didn't know he could change into a cat. Therefore, Lin Kuei was a little stunned by her little hand that was rubbing his head. They say you can't touch a woman's waist, but a man's head. He wasn't in human form, but a cat's head. Puffed. A panther's head couldn't be touched. He was a male, all right? Was she flirting with him? The number of zombies in the surroundings gradually increased. A portion of them surged towards the battlefield of zombies and exotic beasts, while a portion of them surged towards the direction of the base, separating the two sides. If the underground creatures defeated Lin Xiao and the others, they'd have to get past the wall of zombies to get to the base. Just then, several figures appeared on the outskirts of Skyfire base. But aside from the one at the front, the others were lifeless. The one at the front was the only one. He wore a long black trench coat and a black hat on his head. His shoulder-length hair hung messily under the hat, almost covering his entire face in his hair. His build was that of a man, and he wasn't short, at least 1.8 meters. The unidentified man walked through Skyfire base's safe zone in the dark of the night. Behind him were 6 lifeless men. Step by step, he made his way to the base. Several groups of patrolling soldiers passed by, but none of them noticed their presence. After these people took a few steps, their figures suddenly disappeared. When they reappeared, they were on the roof of one of Skyfire's buildings. Li Jingye had just walked out of the bathroom on the 2nd floor and was about to walk back to his bedroom when he suddenly stopped. His eyes flashed as he looked down at the staircase. Then, he returned to his bedroom as if nothing had happened. However, when he came out, he was not wearing pajamas, but a set of ordinary home clothes. After Li Jingye came out, he walked downstairs. When he was halfway down the stairs, he saw a person sitting on the sofa in his dark living room. His face and clothes could not be seen clearly. Li Jingye turned on the lights in the living room. After looking at that person, he smiled and said, "Oh, you're back so soon? I thought it would be another 2 months before you came back. How is it? You got it?" The man took off his hat, revealing a gloomy face. His facial features were originally quite tough, but his temperament and messy long hair had forcibly softened a large part of his femininity. The man's eyes were cold, and his lips were tightly pressed together when Li Jingye asked, "No, he's a 9th-level talent. No one can stop him when he goes berserk." His voice was clear and pleasant to the ear, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. Li Jingye paused, then his face darkened with displeasure. "What? If you didn't get him, then why did you come back so early? Didn't I say I wanted his energy core? If I can't get it, I can't let anyone from China or Green Mountain get it." The long-haired man looked at him coldly. "He's not dead, so no one can get his core. If we can't get it, no one else can." "So you're giving up and coming back so soon?" Li Jingye looked back at him coldly and snorted. "When did I say I'm giving up? I just said no one can stop him now." The man looked at him calmly, and then looked away. "Then you?" Li Jingye was slightly stunned, and his temperature returned to normal. He looked at him in confusion. The long-haired man suddenly smiled evilly and said, "I brought you a gift." He clapped his hands as he spoke. 5 or 6 people walked in and stood in a row in front of the 2 of them. Li Jingye looked up, and his eyes suddenly froze. He looked at the man in shock. "These people are dead?" These people's eyes were gray and dead, and there was no aura coming from them. Their skin looked pale, and there were dark circles around their eyes. Their lips were purple, and they looked like people who had died from poisoning. But Li Jingye had seen them walk in. That's right. If they were dead, why could they still walk? "They are dead, but they are not dead," the long-haired man said. Li Jingye looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean? Are you talking about them?" The long-haired man shook his head. "No, they are just a few of them. Many of them are outside the base, and it is not convenient for them to come in. These few are the ones whose subconscious is the closest to the original, and they are also the strongest. Furthermore, I've brought back an unexpected piece of news for you." Li Jingye looked at him, and then at the living dead. "What news?" "No, you should clarify this first." The long-haired man said, "Can't you see? They were infected by the zombie virus and died. But they still have some scattered memories and subconscious before they died. And they can even understand some of my simple instructions." He waved his hand again and gestured for them to leave. The 5 or 6 living dead immediately turned around and left, walking like normal people. Li Jingye's expression was slightly silent, and he suddenly realized something. "Then how do you want to use them?" Although they had all become zombies, Their movements were the same as ordinary people, as long as they put some decorations on their faces. As long as they put some decorations on their faces, they might be able to sneak into other bases and do things secretly. Not to mention anything else, it would be good to infect them with the zombie virus. If there was anything that humans were afraid of nowadays, the virus was definitely the number one. So if it caused internal panic and caused some trouble secretly, the result could be imagined. Just thinking of this, Li Jingye's eyes gradually lit up. Their role is not just to sneak into other bases to spread the virus. They have a better use. The long-haired man's eyes flashed. Chapter 1004. Li Jingye was surprised by the light in his eyes and looked at him. Oh, what else can it do? The long-haired man revealed a slightly proud smile. Their fighting strength is 3 times stronger than when they were alive. They can also control ordinary zombies and use them as bombs. If we can create such an army and use them on the battlefield, then not only will we not have to be afraid of other bases, but we will also not have to be afraid of zombie attacks. Li Jingye was a bit hesitant. It's fine if you say they are bombs, but you want them to control ordinary zombies? Is that even possible? The long-haired man said. Why not? We just need to control them. Let them control the other zombies. However, we still need more of these death warriors to help us expand our army. That's why I'll leave the method for you to handle. I continued to keep an eye on that level 9 maniac to see when he would die. He's been crazy for a few months. I can feel that the energy in his body is being consumed very quickly. Once the energy in his body is exhausted, his life force will continue to be depleted. Li Jingye's eyes lit up. Oh, so you're saying that it won't take long. Will he die? The long-haired man's eyes flashed, and he raised a hand to his eyes. He clasped his fingers together, then looked at his own hand and said, when his body no longer has the energy to support his berserk state, his body may directly explode with a bang. As he said that, he suddenly opened his 5 fingers and made an explosion gesture. Li Jingye also revealed a look of joy and nodded. All right, I'll help you with this matter, but you have to find a way to get your hands on that 9th grade energy core. Even if I can't let anyone else get it. The long-haired man nodded. I know. Li Jingye then asked him what to do next. The direction that the long-haired man gave him was to give him a bunch of drugs, and then let him find a group of ability users, and then inject the drugs and blood taken from the zombies into the bodies of these ability users. And then it would be done. However, he had to find someone who wasn't willing, because someone who wasn't willing would have a very strong resistance, or the kind of obsession that wouldn't rest in peace. After they become zombies, they will retain a trace of their human subconscious. However, this trace of their subconscious would not allow them to be clear-headed and distinguish between right and wrong. It was just to make it easier for them to accept the commands of humans. So where did you get these people from? Li Jingye asked the long-haired man. The group that had just appeared didn't look like they were from Skyfire. The long-haired man only smiled coldly and said, if you want to find someone who has the mentality to resist, of course, you have to find the ability users from other bases. That group just now is from Qingshan base, and the group outside is from China. Li Jingye, however, smirked at him and said, if you keep acting like this, Zikong-chun, and that blue land will kill you sooner or later. Aren't you afraid? The long-haired man sneered disdainfully. There are many people who want to kill me, but they have to find me first. Oh, by the way, I just said that I have a message for you. It's the female leader of the new base in Huadong. Did you know that she's actually a zombie? Don't you find it unbelievable? Li Jingye was stunned when he heard that. Then he immediately widened his eyes and looked at him in disbelief. What? Are you kidding me? She doesn't look like a zombie at all. Do you think I'd believe that? The long-haired man looked at him calmly. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. I haven't confirmed whether the information is true or not, but I suggest that if you're sure she's a zombie, don't leak the information. The best thing to do is capture her. The long-haired man's eyes, which were covered by his long hair on both sides of his forehead, lit up with a strange light. He was very excited and very curious, but also had a strong ruthless and bloody crazed look. If she really is a zombie, then she's worth far more than what we've got. Think about it. A female zombie that looks like a human can speak and is strong enough to build a new base. She's also so beautiful. How can we let such a special female zombie disappear? Li Jingye looked at the long-haired man with a strange expression. It was a mixture of fear and helplessness. All right, I understand. But first we need to know if what you're saying is true. Where did you get this information? He asked. I overheard it from Lan Lu. The long-haired man's expression disappeared, and he answered calmly. Then Lan Lu also knows? Then he still dares to cooperate with this base? Li Jingye looked doubtful. The long-haired man looked at him and said, This Lan Lu knows more than us. If I hadn't been keeping an eye on him recently, I wouldn't have accidentally heard about this. You don't need to worry about this. Just go and find out if it's true or not before making a decision. At this time in Qingshan's temporary base, Lan Lu, Chang Qingqing, and Hu Daba were sitting together with a worried expression. If this news gets out, it won't be good for Miss Lu's situation. Chang Qingqing said with a frown. If she can hide it well, then they won't know if I'm telling the truth or not. At that time, we'll spread the news and say it's fake. We should be able to hide it. Lan Lu said with a bitter smile. I hope she can cooperate with us. But we're too far away from the base. The information is a bit slow. Chang Qingqing said. They had to send the information to the base, to the female zombie leader. Of course, this information couldn't be known by the person who accidentally got the news from Lan Lu. So they couldn't just fly a helicopter over. Roar, roar, roar. You leaked the information yourself. Think of a way yourself. Hu Daba rolled his eyes at Lan Lu. Anyway, hurry up and find a suitable person to send out. Not only do we need to inform Miss Lu, but we also need to inform Wu Qingyue and Haiqing. If we don't tell him, when he finds out that we leaked his wife's identity, he'll kill me. Lan Lu looked at the other two with a sad face. Hu Daba looked at the ceiling, indicating that he didn't care about this. If it was their own trouble, then they should deal with it themselves. Chang Qingqing frowned slightly and thought about it. How about we let Lei Cheng and Yingyue go? With early eye speed, although it's not as fast as a plane, it's the fastest way on land. Lan Lu sighed and said, Sigh, that's the only way. But if early eye has to carry two people at the same time, it'll be a bit strenuous. Only one can go. Then Yingyue. The main purpose of this mission is to send information. Yingyue has the space element. Although she's a bit weaker, her escape skills are better than Lei Cheng's. Chang Qingqing nodded. Chapter 1005. Lin Xiao, who was fighting with the level 8 underworld creature, didn't know that his identity had been leaked by Lan Lu. However, the other party was skeptical. If it was someone else, they wouldn't believe Lan Lu. However, Lan Lu met someone with a screw loose. Bang. Lin Xiao was once again swept by the claw of the level 8 underground creature, and his body was sent flying. She flew out and crashed into a building beside her, creating a hole in the wall. Cough. Lin Xiao spat out a mouthful of black blood. She immediately dashed out of the building. Boom! After she dashed out, the level 8 creature smashed into the building where Lin Xiao had crashed into. Rumble, the entire building, which was only 3 stories high, was completely destroyed by it. Lin Xiao sighed. Sure enough, she was still too weak. Although she was a level 7 zombie and a level 2 king, her strength hadn't recovered yet. The opponent was a level 8 mutated beast that could go berserk. That was comparable to a level 9 zombie. Terrifying. That was why she was being beaten up like a sandbag. Most of her energy had been dispersed to the bodies of the underground creatures. Her image was pitiful. The others were also in a worse state than her. Only Qiu Lily wasn't as pitiful as she was in the sky. These creatures didn't have long-range skills and couldn't attack her. However, the Black Panther on the ground was also pitiful. The claw wounds on its back increased. Its ear was cut. If it wasn't for Qiu Lily's timely help, its entire right ear would have been cut off. Elmar then transformed and joined in as well. However, she had a broken bone, and her movements were slow. She couldn't deal with the big ones, so she could only deal with the small ones. After the level 8 creature destroyed the building, it saw that Lin Xiao had slipped away. It became impatient and stood on the ruins to sniff in Lin Xiao's direction. Suddenly, it turned its head and sniffed in the direction of the base. Lin Xiao saw its expression and knew that things weren't good. Sure enough, the level 8 creature raised its head and roared. Roar! Roar, roar, roar. The other underground creatures responded to its roar and left the zombies behind to go to their leader. As for the zombies that were thrown down, they were all covered in wounds. Although it wouldn't take their lives, they looked quite miserable. At this time, Yuan Tianxing, Lin Feng, and the others who were standing on the walls of the universal base were also very anxious because of the information they received from the battlefield. However, they did not have any practical means of attack, so they could not go out and help at all. They were not as strong as zombies and did not have immortal bodies. If they went, they would only be a burden to Lin Xiao and the others and increase their death rate. It was precisely because Lin Xiao did not want to see such a situation that he did not let these weak humans join the battle. Therefore, they could only evacuate those who could not fight as quickly as possible while paying close attention to the situation on the battlefield. This is bad. Leader won't be able to hold them off for long. Li Zheng had just returned from the front of the battlefield and said to Yuan Tianxing anxiously. Lin Feng, who was beside him, immediately asked, "Report the details." Li Zheng said, "Originally, the leader's ability was able to restrain the underground creatures, but the level 8 leader was too strong after going berserk. The leader couldn't deal with it and restrain the other underground creatures at the same time. Therefore, she cut off her control over them. Now that Qiu Lily and the others are all injured, and even the leader is being abused, those things are very impatient. Now a large number of zombies are gathering between our base and the battlefield. It won't take long to stop them." Yuan Tianxing glanced at Lin Feng, and Lin Feng nodded. "Let's go now," even though she doesn't want to ask him for help. Although she is not very willing to ask for his help, we can't just watch them fight in front of us. Looking for our leader? No need, he is already here. At this time, a voice suddenly interrupted. Yuan Tianxing and the others turned their heads and saw that Haiqing's Xiao Yunlong had appeared in their group. "You said Leader Wu is here?" Seeing him, everyone was stunned for a moment and quickly reacted. They immediately revealed a surprised smile. Xiao Yunlong smiled and said, "Of course he is here. If he doesn't come, his wife will be gone." Everyone. Suddenly, they did not know what to say. When Lin Xiao saw that these underground creatures were beginning to lose interest in the zombies, she felt that something was wrong and immediately rushed forward again. She controlled all the energy in her body into a dark fire and waved it at the level 8 underground creature. A black lotus the size of a wash basin immediately turned into several strands of black fire that spread out and rushed towards the level 8 underground creature. It drilled into its mouth, nose, and ears and quickly dispersed in its body. Roar dash. After this black fire drilled into its body, the attack speed was worlds apart from the one that Lin Xiao had casually thrown out. But even so, Lin Xiao still felt that her dark fire was suppressed in her body and could not move. The level 8 underground creature stopped and gathered its energy to attack her dark fire. The red light on its body flickered intensely. Its whole body was bent, as if it was using a lot of strength. Roar dash, however, the other underground creatures knocked away the surrounding zombies and continued to rush in the direction of the base. Lin Xiao's ability was only in a stalemate for half a minute when the level 8 giant creature suddenly stood up. Roar dash, then the red light on its body burst into a dazzling brilliance. Poof! Lin Xiao felt that all the energy that she had placed on the creature was devoured. The empty feeling in her body caused the blood in her chest to gush out. Roar! The level 8 underground creature turned to look at her and leaped towards her in a flash. It wanted to trample her to death. Bang boom! At this time, a half-meter thick lightning bolt that looked like the root of a plant suddenly struck the giant underground creature leader that had just leaped into the air. Bang! Roar dash! The underground creature leader roared in pain and was smashed to the ground. He fell to the ground and smelled of something burning. However, after the first bolt of lightning struck down, a dozen more bolts of lightning followed, blasting the other gorillas who were rushing towards the base a few hundred meters away to the ground. When Lin Xiao saw the underground creature leader leap up, she wanted to prop up her body and dodge. But suddenly, a pair of arms carried her up and she fell into the arms of a man. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in another location. Chapter 1006. Lin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief when she smelled the familiar scent. But she said in surprise, "Huh? Did they inform you to come so early? It seems like it's not the right time yet." Wu Qingyue had a smile on his face, but the light in his eyes was a bit dangerous. "Not when? Do they want to wait until you turn from a complete zombie into a broken zombie before they call me?" Although the female zombie's mouth and chest reeked of blood, he found that her body didn't have any major injuries. However, his heart, which was hanging high in the air, did not relax. He saw from afar that she couldn't dodge in time, and the monster was about to trample her flat. His whole body was instantly wrapped in a kind of panic, and he almost instinctively raised his hand to attack the giant beast. But now this female zombie actually said that he came at the wrong time. It was so infuriating. If he didn't appear in time, wouldn't she have been trampled into a pile of meat, and then waiting for him to collect her body? Thinking of that scene, Wu Qingyue's whole body began to become violent. Lin Xiao heard his words and felt the fluctuation of his breath again. She said hesitantly in her heart, "So they didn't actually inform you to come? Put me down first. Since you're here, please help me get rid of this big guy." This man didn't let go of her, so Lin Xiao could only ask him to put her down. Wu Qingyue put her down, and the two of them were standing on the roof of a building. He looked at her coldly. "Together? Do you think you can still fight?" Don't think that he didn't feel that her energy had been used up. Lin Xiao's mouth twitched with some guilt, and she couldn't help but look at him and said, "It's berserk now. Do you think you can get rid of it by yourself?" Wu Qingyue looked at her, and the beautiful smile on the corner of his mouth was somewhat inexplicable. But a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, and he said, "At least a little stronger than you." Then he suddenly waved his hand without raising his head. Boom dash! A huge silver lightning struck down from the sky, accurately hitting the level 8 underground creature that had just recovered a little. Roar dash Lin Xiao. She had to admit that this man's ability seemed to be a little stronger. It seemed like he was preparing to break through. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding thunderbolts fell continuously, targeting the level 5 and above underground creatures. When the first lightning appeared, Chiu Lily and the other zombies were relieved. This was because they all knew that apart from their leader, only Wu Qingyue could deal with these creatures that crawled out of the ground. After being struck twice, the level 8 underground gorilla was dumbfounded. But when lightning struck it for the third time, the level 8 underground gorilla was stunned. However, it managed to dodge in time. Humph. Roar. It shook its charred head a few times, and when it woke up, it immediately bared its teeth at Wu Qingyue and roared at him. It was obvious that she was angered by his 2 strikes. The other underworld creatures that were struck by lightning had their red lights dimmed. When they heard the roar of the level 8 underworld creature, they roared in resonance. Roar, roar, roar. Roar. Waves of roars rushed towards Wu Qingyue. If it was an ordinary person, their spiritual consciousness would have been shattered by these roars. However, Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao didn't feel anything. Instead, Lin Xiao heard that these things were angry. "They are angry," Lin Xiao said in surprise. When she used her ability to deal with them, she didn't see any signs of anger from these creatures. "Stay here and don't move." After Wu Qingyue said this to her, he rushed out in a flash, and a dark thunder pressure came from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Lightning flashed in the dark clouds and struck the underworld creatures from time to time. Although they were struck by lightning, the higher level ones wouldn't die immediately. However, the red lights on their bodies flickered and temporarily lost their fighting power. Those that were level 5 and below were directly killed by the lightning. Roar! Wu Qingyue's lightning power made the level 8 underworld creature furious and fearful at the same time. It roared and leaped towards Wu Qingyue. The huge figure was like a giant light beast. It pounced in front of Wu Qingyue with a red light and slashed at him with its steel blade-like claws. The level 8 underworld gorilla was very fast. It moved in front of Wu Qingyue the moment the wind blew. He opened his mouth and roared at him. At the same time he attacked. The beast's roar was to scare its target or to distract them. It was indeed very useful for weak prey. Wu Qingyue wasn't unaffected. At least his ears were a little shaken. However, he didn't stop and dodged. At the same time, he released another lightning strike at the level 8 underworld creature. Boom! This time the level 8 underworld creature nimbly dodged his attack. He was hit twice by Wu Qingyue just now, because he was ambushed by Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue's attack couldn't lock onto the underworld creature. Both sides immediately started fighting fiercely. Wu Qingyue's lightning struck continuously, causing sparks and dust to fly everywhere. From time to time, there would be flashes of light in the dark night. The huge red light of the underworld creature was also covered in a red light, leaving red shadows in its path. Every time it attacked, it used its huge claws to smash houses and countless mutated plants in the surroundings. Soon, this area collapsed and became a mess, turning into piles of ruins. Flames were burning everywhere due to the explosions of the lightning. Lin Xiao stood on the roof and looked at Wu Qingyue fighting the level 8 underworld creature to a draw. She looked at Wu Qingyue in surprise. On the other side, Qiu Lily waved her hand. A few tornadoes swept a few level 5 underworld creatures in front of her up 200 meters into the air and threw them back down. Bang, bang, bang. The bodies of these level 5 underworld creatures weren't as tough as the level 7 ones. Although they didn't fall apart after falling, they suffered some internal injuries. Before they could recover, they were swept up by Qiu Lily again and fell again. Bang, bang, bang. After falling 3 or 4 times, these creatures couldn't get up anymore. Qiu Lily stood on the roof and looked at the corpse of the gorilla that she had fallen to death. She complained speechlessly. It took 4 falls to kill a level 5 one. What did these things eat to grow up? Lin Xiao, the big black leopard, sat beside her and wagged his tail. He raised his front paw and looked at it with a trace of helplessness in his eyes. Chapter 1007. Although Wu Qingyue was alone, he managed to subdue the level 8 berserk creature. The situation turned around. Lin Xiao watched the battle for a while and knew that the level 8 creature couldn't leave the battlefield for the time being. Lin Xiao watched the battle for a while and knew that the level 8 creature couldn't leave the battlefield for the time being. She was grateful for Wu Qingyue's arrival. At the same time, the strange feelings that she suppressed in the corner of her heart started to stir. Looking at the figure of the other party, this man was really strong. She had to admit that. However, this powerful man gradually poured more and more feelings into her. The influence on her heart gradually became more and more frequent. Lin Xiao retracted her gaze and took a deep breath. She turned to look at the other underground creatures. The number of underworld creatures had increased because their companions had joined them. Although they were surrounded by a large number of zombies, the claws and teeth of the zombies had no effect on them. Moreover, these creatures were extremely strong. With a wave of their claws, they could sweep away a group of zombies. Fortunately, there were many zombies. If the human wave tactic didn't work, there was still the human wall tactic. Lin Xiao stretched out her hands and began to sense the powers that she had left in the bodies of the other underground creatures. She used her own powers to control them. The nether fire in the body of the nearest level 6 underground creature surged and began to absorb the powers of these creatures. Roar! The level 6 underground gorilla let out a panicked roar and began to scratch its chest. Soon, the situation began to spread to the other underground creatures. Dozens of level 5 and level 6 underground creatures began to scratch its chest. Qiu Lily, Elmar, and the others had been counterattacked for a while and were all injured. There weren't many left with combat power. But Qiu Lily and Lin Kuei were the 2 who were in the best condition. Lin Xiao looked around and suddenly dashed out. If she didn't focus on the level 8 monster, she would have other ways to deal with the level 6 and level 7 underground creatures. A level 7 underground gorilla the size of a buffalo was scratching its chest with its sharp claws. The red light on its body flickered intermittently. Lin Xiao suddenly appeared on its neck and wrapped his legs around its neck. He then hugged the head of the underground creature. In the next second, she and the underground creature disappeared at the same time. After a few seconds, Lin Xiao appeared beside another level 7 underworld creature. Using the same method, the level 7 underground creature was once again captured into the space. Apart from the 5 at the beginning and the few that joined later, there were a total of 10 level 7 underworld creatures. At this time, these rank 7 creatures were being tortured by Lin Xiao's Hellfire ability. They didn't even notice her movements as they were brought into the space. Wow, leader, are you planning to raise them all in the space? Qiu Lily's eyes widened when she saw Lin Xiao's actions. She's much stronger in the space than she is in the outside world. If it wasn't for the fact that she had to pin down that level 8 beast, she would have been able to do so. Leader could have thrown these things into the space forest a long time ago. The black forest leopard swung his thick black tail and stood up. He walked to her side and opened his mouth to speak human language. Qiu Lily nodded thoughtfully. I see. The two of them shifted their gazes to the other side where the thunder was rumbling. They saw that the Class 8 giant beast was madly chasing after Wu Qingyue. From time to time, it would be struck by Wu Qingyue's lightning. But its body structure was really strong. It had been struck by Wu Qingyue several times. Besides the flickering red light, there was no injury on its body. Wu Qingyue raised his eyebrows. He suddenly raised his hands and put his palms together, as if he was hugging something. Suddenly he pulled down. Clank, boom. A huge thunderclap resounded. This thunderclap was very loud. It was so loud that the surrounding zombies and underworld creatures stopped and looked up at the sky instinctively. They saw a lightning beam at least 1.5 meters thick descending from the sky towards the huge underground creature. Roar! The level 8 gorilla stopped and looked up at the sky with a vigilant expression. As soon as it looked up, the lightning beam fell on its head. It didn't even have time to dodge. Boom! The earth trembled as the lightning struck down. It blasted a huge pit in the middle of the road, where the level 8 underground creature was. The level 8 gorilla was also blasted into the bottom of the pit. Roar! The level 8 gorilla let out a shrill scream. It was obvious that the lightning beam caused significant damage to it. Wu Qingyue flashed to the edge of the pit, and the second lightning beam fell. At this time, the level 8 giant beast at the bottom of the pit hadn't recovered from the previous attack. It was struck by another lightning beam that was 1 meter thick. Woo! When it was hit by the first lightning beam, the level 8 underground creature was already injured. When the second lightning beam fell on it, the huge body of the level 8 underground creature lay in the pit and couldn't get up. But it still struggled to stand up and didn't want to admit defeat. Wu Qingyue expressionlessly glanced around and found that the figure of the female zombie had disappeared. At the same time, there were a dozen level 7 underground creatures. He frowned slightly. Was that female zombie going to deal with so many underground creatures by herself? Could she deal with them? It should be about the same. It seemed that her flame ability was also very effective against these things. Wu Qingyue originally trusted Lin Xiao's strength, but considering that she hadn't recovered to her peak, and that she had caught 10 level 7 underground creatures at once, it was hard for him not to worry. It wasn't just 1 or 2. It was hard for him not to worry. At this time, the 10 level 7 underground creatures that Lin Xiao threw into the spatial forest were standing still with their noses and ears stretched out vigilantly. They were sniffing and listening, as if they were trying to identify the location. The unfamiliar smell, and the smell of their own kind had disappeared. This made them panic. Lin Xiao quietly landed on a tree in the middle of the forest, and sat on top of the tree. She sat on top of the tree with her eyes closed, and started to control the power of the space to suppress the 10 underground creatures. At the same time, she used her ability to control the dark fire in their bodies, and quickly extracted their energy to transform it into her own. Roar, roar, roar. Immediately, furious roars of beasts could be heard coming from the forest. Outside the forest, Mo Yen and the female zombie looked at the direction of the forest in confusion. They didn't know what Lin Xiao was doing, and the herd of sheep and roe deer on the other side of the lake were immediately frightened after hearing the roars. If they didn't run away, they would just lie down on the grass and shiver with their heads buried in their hands. Chapter 1008. With the support of the space, Lin Xiao controlled the death flame to devour the energy of these creatures with ease. With the energy of these creatures, the originally empty energy in her zombie core gradually began to recover a little. Wu Qingyue was keeping an eye on the most dangerous and terrifying monster in the outside world. The other level 7 zombies were kept in the space by Lin Xiao, leaving only level 6 and below. But for the other zombies besides Qiu Lili and Lin Quan, they were still difficult to deal with. Qiu Lili flew the level 6 zombie into the sky and fell down. If it was too low, it wouldn't die. If it was too high, it would adjust its posture in midair. When it fell to the ground, not only was it not injured, but it could also land safely. Roar dash at this moment, when it was suppressed by Wu Qingyue in the deep pit and struck by lightning. The underground creature suddenly roared and flashed left and right at the bottom of the pit. Then, it dragged its body out of the pit. After it roared, the surrounding underground creatures turned around and retreated. They are retreating. Qiu Lili's eyes suddenly lit up. Lin Quan used her claws to press a level 5 underground creature to the ground and flipped it over. Then, she lifted her claws and clawed at the weak belly of the creature. Puff dash. Even if it was a belly, the skin of these creatures was still very tough. Lin Kuei's powerful claws only left a few shallow wounds. It didn't even break the stomach of the level 5 underground creature. There wasn't much blood flowing out of the wounds. Only a little bit of blood oozed out before it stopped automatically. However, Lin Kuei immediately bared his teeth and bit the wounds. Then, he pinned down the struggling creature with his 4 legs and started biting. He tore his belly open and used his claws to stab into the torn wound and clawed fiercely. Roar dash. The pain in its abdomen made the level 5 underground creature struggle with all its might. But no matter how it struggled, it was easily held down by Lin Kuei. Soon, its stomach was bleeding from Lin Kuei's bite, and its intestines were dug out. The surrounding underground creatures began to retreat in the direction they came from. But it wasn't so easy for the level 8 underground creature to leave. Rumble. Continuous lightning bolts blasted towards it. Although it didn't matter if 1 or 2 slashes landed on its body, it was still very painful to be continuously struck like this. The level 8 underground creature realized that as long as there was a food that could release lightning, it wouldn't be able to bring its brethren forward. Since they couldn't win, they could only retreat. That was why the level 8 creature gave the order to retreat, and its subordinates, who were weaker than it, disappeared. This made it very fearful. Of course, Wu Qingyue wouldn't let it run away just like that, lest it came out again. As a result, the number of lightning bolts that fell immediately increased, and the power of each bolt was enough to blow up a small building. However, it only left a fist-sized wound on the body of the level 8 underground creature. But at this time, its body was full of such wounds. Although they weren't fatal, they were still very painful. The level 8 underground gorilla didn't want to bother with Wu Qingyue. It just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible or escape from the attack of its prey. But no matter how it dodged, the other party followed it closely and bombarded it with lightning bolts. The level 8 underground gorilla started to become irritable. Along with its irritation, the red light on its body began to shine intensely. The color became brighter and brighter, from red to orange to orange, then to yellow, and finally to yellowish white. Wu Qingyue had a premonition that this huge creature might launch a skill attack, so he was prepared to retreat cautiously. At this moment, the light on the 10-meter-tall creature suddenly shot a light beam with a diameter of 1 meter that shone directly on Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue felt his mind shake when the yellowish-white light shone on him, and his consciousness suddenly blurred. The level 8 underground creature only shone on him for 2 seconds before withdrawing the light. Then, it quickly turned around and avoided him, leaping tens of meters in the direction of the previous hole. Wu Qingyue, who was left behind, stood motionless and didn't continue to release lightning bolts. The thunderclouds in the sky began to gradually disperse. Wu Qingyue didn't move, so no one could continue to stop the level 8 underground creature. Soon, its huge figure disappeared into the night. The surrounding underworld creatures also dived into the water. The group of zombies that had received Lin Xiao's order chased after them. Qiu Lily discovered Wu Qingyue's situation after she killed a level 6 zombie with great difficulty. She saw that he was suddenly standing still and didn't care that the level 8 underground creature had run away. She immediately flashed in front of him, intending to ask him what was going on. Did you let it run away? Or you couldn't stop it? But Wu Qingyue didn't respond to her after she asked. Qiu Lily realized that although he was standing, his eyes were closed. She didn't know what he was doing. Hey! Qiu Lily raised her small hand and waved it in front of his face. At this time, the energy in Wu Qingyue's body suddenly became irritable. Oh no! Qiu Lily suddenly screamed, and her figure quickly disappeared in front of Wu Qingyue. When she reappeared, she was already high up in the sky. Boom! Rumble, rumble. At this time, the thunderclouds above Wu Qingyue's head began to gather again, and there was a faint, dull sound of thunder. Right at this moment, Wu Qingyue's eyes snapped open. However, his pupils were emitting a purple glow. Both of his pupils had turned into amethyst in color. Boom! Rumble, rumble. The energy in his body overflowed and formed an energy whirlpool with a diameter of 5 meters around him. Everything within 5 meters of Wu Qingyue's feet was twisted into dust and dissipated by his energy. After Wu Qingyue's energy overflowed, the sound of thunder in the sky became more intense. There was a vague feeling that it was about to land, but it didn't. Rumble, rumble. This fella is crazy again. Qiu Lily stared with her ruby-like eyes for a while, and suddenly murmured in surprise. Then she flashed and appeared next to Lin Kuei. What's going on? Lin Kuei lifted his leopard head to look at the sky and asked Qiu Lily in confusion. He originally thought that Wu Qingyue looked quite powerful this time, and should be able to deal with that huge monster. Unexpectedly, the monster suddenly shot a ray of light at Wu Qingyue, and Wu Qingyue let it go. Not only did he let it go, but looking at the chaotic explosion of energy around Wu Qingyue, he couldn't have gone crazy, right? But didn't he already go crazy once? Why is there a second time? There must be something wrong with the ray of light shot by the underground creature. Otherwise, why would Wu Qingyue suddenly become like this? Qiu Lily said. Chapter 1009. The zombie and the Black Panther looked at each other. At this time, the other zombies saw that the underground creatures had retreated. They retreated to Qiu Lily's side. Elmar limped on one leg and hopped to Qiu Lily's side. She looked at Lin Kuei and was surprised to see a zombie that could transform into a big fluffy cat. Then she looked at Wu Qingyue and said, "Why does this situation look so familiar?" You'll know why it looks familiar when you get closer," Qiu Lily said calmly. "Why did he suddenly go crazy? And didn't they say that a psychic that has gone crazy once won't go crazy a second time?" Elmar said with a puzzled expression. Qiu Lily turned her head and looked around. Then she said with a miserable face, "Wow, all of you are so miserable. How long will it take to cure him?" Apart from herself, there were a few level 5 wind element leaders. Only a few of them were uninjured. All of them were covered in blood, and they had to clean up the blood on their bodies before returning to the base. Lin Kuei's head wasn't injured, but there was a cut on his ear. His back was in a miserable state. He didn't transform back to human form, because he had no clothes to wear. He had to transform back naked. The leader put all the level 7 creatures into the space. "Can she handle it?" Elmar frowned slightly. Qiu Lily nodded confidently. "Yes, she can. She's very powerful. But if she comes out and finds out that this guy went crazy again, and that big guy ran away, I don't know how she will feel. Everyone. She will probably laugh at him. Although he didn't fail, he didn't accomplish anything?" Elmar was silent for a while before replying with a wicked smile. "Does he still have instinctive consciousness? Will it be like last time? Can he still recognize our leader?" Qiu Lily suddenly asked. The others looked at her and didn't say anything. At this time Lin Xiao, who was hiding in the space and devouring the energy of 10 underground creatures, didn't know that the level 8 alien beast he left for Wu Qingyue had run away, and that someone was going crazy. Qiu Lily and the others gathered together to watch the retreating underworld creatures, and Wu Qingyue, who was standing motionless at the same spot. There was no expression on Wu Qingyue's face. His pupils had turned into a purple crystal color, glowing like two stars in the dark night. The clouds above his head were very thick. Lightning snakes flickered in and out of the clouds, but not a single bolt of lightning fell. The energy that burst out from his body only filled a 5-meter radius around him, and did not expand. Wu Qingyue's amethyst eyes were cold, but he slowly moved his gaze left and right, as if he was looking for something. Lin Xiao didn't have to worry about the outside world. He spent 3 hours devouring the 10 underground creatures and burning their corpses before coming out of the space. He thought that when he came out, he would see that the battlefield was over. Even if Wu Qingyue couldn't kill the level 8 underground creature, he should at least be able to chase it away. There was no aura of the underworld creatures. Meanwhile, Qiu Lily and the others were gathered together to watch the show. What happened? How did he become like this? Lin Xiao was stunned when she saw Wu Qingyue's situation. She flashed to Qiu Lily's side and asked in puzzlement, You're out. It seems that you've cleaned up those guys. Qiu Lily said happily when she saw Lin Xiao. Then she remembered to answer her question. Oh, when you entered the space, he was having fun torturing the big guy. Maybe the big guy realized that he was not easy to deal with, so he wanted to run away with his subordinates. But Wu Qingyue stopped him. As a result, the red light on his body turned into white light and shone on him. That's how he became like this. Lin Xiao frowned and asked, How long has he been like this? Qiu Lily replied, More than 3 hours. While they were talking, Wu Qingyue, who had been standing motionless for more than 3 hours, suddenly looked in their direction. That pair of amethyst eyes stared at him intently. Wow. Oh no, he's looking at us. Qiu Lily and the others tensed up, and immediately felt an inexplicable sense of danger. At this time, Lin Xiao had a bad premonition. She subconsciously said, No way. He's coming again. Sure enough, as soon as she finished speaking, the man who had been standing motionlessly on the ruins suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Then a strong pressure came toward them. They immediately scattered like birds and beasts. The next second, Wu Qingyue's figure appeared where they had scattered. Then, he raised his head and looked in the direction that Lin Xiao had retreated. The pair of cold amethyst eyes stared at Lin Xiao's position with a slightly crazy expression. Wow, he recognized the leader. It's true love. Elmar's figure flashed to a high-voltage electric pole and she said, Then there's still hope. Thank goodness. Qiu Lily's figure also flashed on the roof next to them. Seeing that Wu Qingyue's eyes were only locked in Lin Xiao's direction, everyone felt inexplicably relieved. While the others heaved a sigh of relief, Lin Xiao felt a little bitter. Because she had been locked on by Wu Qingyue, under the pressure of the other party's stronger pressure, she could not directly enter the space. What the hell was this situation? Can't he just be fine? Wu Qingyue's figure disappeared again, and flashed toward her in the blink of an eye. Lin Xiao tried to enter the space again, but she still could not. She suddenly gave up struggling, but her whole body was still tightly on guard. She wanted to see what was going on with this person now. As long as this person dared to attack her, she'd better run. Anyway, she could not defeat him. Since she could not enter the space, what else could she do other than run? Just as she was thinking about it, Wu Qingyue immediately appeared in front of her with a somewhat violent energy aura. But strangely, he still maintained a distance of 0.5 meter from her. He just stood in front of her and slightly lowered his head, looking at her with those beautiful amethyst eyes. Lin Xiao. The others. Just as Lin Xiao and the others were confused, Wu Qingyue quietly looked at her for a few seconds, then slightly lowered his head and slightly smelled the aura on her body. Then he raised his hand and slowly touched her face. Lin Xiao. Was he planning to take advantage of her crazy, so he dared to tease her? Then everyone immediately revealed an expression of oh, so that's how it is. Lin Xiao turned her head to the side and avoided Wu Qingyue's hand. Then she saw that there was a circle of less than 10 meters of zombies standing around, looking like they were watching a show. Her face could not help but turn black. What kind of zombies are these? Can't they just watch the show from a distance? Chapter 10:10. Before Lin Xiao could say anything, Wu Qingyue, who was in front of her, suddenly turned his head and stared at the surrounding zombies. The energy that was originally only revolving around him, within 5 meters, suddenly expanded and exploded. It was very aggressive, as it rushed towards the surrounding zombies. Wow, he's angry. Qiu Lily flashed into the air and let out a strange cry. Although Wu Qingyue's energy repelled other zombies or other creatures getting close to him, he seemed to be very close to Lin Xiao. Seeing the other zombies being swept away by Wu Qingyue's energy, Lin Xiao was speechless as she looked up at the dark sky. The dark clouds above seemed to be dissipating. At this time, Wu Qingyue suddenly reached out and grabbed Lin Xiao's wrist. Then he lifted her hand to the tip of his nose and sniffed. Then he gently pulled her in front of him, leaned forward and slightly lowered his head to sniff Lin Xiao's neck. The familiar sweet scent made his eyes flicker bright and dark. Even when he was doing these actions, his face was still cold, and even his eyes were cold, but his actions were very gentle. Wu Qingyue's instinctive actions made Lin Xiao slightly uncomfortable. Although she had already experienced this person's instinctive consciousness last time. Although she didn't dislike Wu Qingyue as much now, she also didn't resist him a lot. But she still felt that the current situation between the two of them was a bit strange, as if it was developing in a strange direction. Lin Xiao slightly took a step back, but it was this movement that immediately caused Wu Qingyue to have a slightly excited reaction. As soon as she moved, he suddenly reached out with his other hand and grabbed the back of Lin Xiao's neck, pressing her neck forward. Lin Xiao, who almost collided with his face. The zombies that were forced back by Wu Qingyue curiously guessed Wu Qingyue's actions. What is he doing? Why is he smelling the leader's scent like a puppy? He might be using his instincts to analyze the leader's scent. Anyway, he has no consciousness now. Everything he does is just an instinctive reaction. I think so too. But look at the sky. The thunderclouds have dispersed. It seems that the leader's words had a great effect on him. Lin Xiao, who didn't dare to move after hearing their conversation, thought, "Someone take this lunatic away." Just as she began to roll her eyes speechlessly, Wu Qingyue's face, which was originally just lowering his head to smell her scent, began to move closer and closer. When a warm breath touched Lin Xiao's neck, her whole body suddenly trembled. A feeling similar to goosebumps spread from the skin of his neck to his heart, like an electric current. Lin Xiao immediately felt terrible. Then, when a pair of warm lips kissed her neck, Lin Xiao cursed in her heart. Motherfucker. No way. The kiss on her neck made Lin Xiao want to struggle, but the hand on the back of her neck, and the hand holding her hand, made her unable to move. Moreover, the other party's body gradually leaned over, and began to stick to her body. Qiu Lily, Elmar, and the others were watching from a distant rooftop. Although they were far away, they could see clearly. Wow, what's going on? Qiu Lily stared with her eyes wide open and said curiously. Elmar stood next to her with one leg, and raised a hand to cover her eyes. Children shouldn't look. Qiu Lily slapped her hand away. You're the child. Perhaps because the surrounding aura was too chaotic, Wu Qingyue's movements suddenly stopped. He pulled away slightly, and then let go of the hand that was holding the back of Lin Xiao's neck. But in the next second, he pulled Lin Xiao and disappeared on the spot. He directly took Lin Xiao away. Oh, he took the leader away. Elmar said somewhat speechlessly. It's okay. It looks like he won't hurt the leader anyway, Qiu Lily said calmly. Why don't you say that the leader actually has a way to escape on her own? Elmar glanced at her. Qiu Lily turned to look at her, and suddenly glanced at her leg. Does it hurt? Elmar. What does that sarcastic look mean? When Lin Xiao was pulled away, she watched helplessly as Wu Qingyue took her into the sky, and then quickly flew in the direction of Haicheng. Wu Qingyue's speed was very fast, and as soon as he left, he withdrew all the energy in his body. It no longer flowed out, and the thunder in the sky also disappeared. What was going on? Why did this person suddenly bring her to Haicheng? Had he lost his mind, or had he not lost it yet? Why did he bring her to Haicheng? When Lin Xiao and him landed in a familiar small courtyard, Lin Xiao's face darkened again. Oh, very good. This man had already entered a manic state and lost his mind, but he still didn't forget to take her home. What was going on? He actually remembered to go home. The appearance of Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao immediately attracted the attention of the secret guards around the leader's residence. But when they saw that it was their leader and his wife, they silently pretended not to see them and continued to secretly keep watch. Because Wu Qingyue's state didn't seem to change at first glance, and they were far away, they couldn't see Wu Qingyue's eyes. So they didn't know that their leader was in a strange state. Wu Qingyue looked at his courtyard, then pulled Lin Xiao into the house. He didn't let go. After entering, Wu Qingyue looked left and right, then pulled Lin Xiao to the kitchen, then to the storeroom, then to the bathroom, and so on, as if he was looking for something. Lin Xiao allowed him to hold her hand as she observed his expression. At this moment, Wu Qingyue's face was still expressionless, but his lips were pursed into a straight line. The purple light in his cold eyes began to flicker violently. What was he looking for? Could he be looking for Lingling? Lin Xiao thought about it hesitantly, hesitating whether she should ask. But she was afraid that if she said something, it would agitate him. That wouldn't be good. So she continued to remain silent. She thought about how to wake this guy up. If she didn't wake him up, she wouldn't be able to be free. Was it going to be like the previous time? Was she going to feed him water with her mouth? Her heart was so tired. After Wu Qingyue pulled her around the first floor, he suddenly stopped in front of the stairs, then immediately pulled her up to the second floor. He looked around on the second floor, then continued to the third floor. Then, after Wu Qingyue pushed open the door to his room, he suddenly stopped. Lin Xiao looked at his room blankly. It was clean and tidy, a little too clean. Before she could finish looking at his room, she suddenly felt someone pulling her. Then her body was pushed onto the bed. Bang! The door was slammed shut. Lin Xiao, huh? Wait, what's going on? Weren't you looking for your daughter? So you weren't looking for your daughter, just your bedroom, bastard. Chapter 10-11. Lin Xiao, who felt his body being pushed onto the bed, immediately reacted. Almost at the same time as he fell, he kicked Wu Qingyue, who was pouncing on him. Her kick was swift and precise, but her opponent was faster than her, and blocked her kick with his hand. In the next second, she was pressed onto the bed. Xiao Lin. 10,000 mutated beasts stampeded across his heart. Wu Qingyue's body pressed tightly against Lin Xiao's, and his eyes were fixed on Lin Xiao's face. Then he lowered his head to smell Lin Xiao's scent again. The more he smelled, the more reluctant he was to let go. Lin Xiao's hands were suppressed by him, so he couldn't do anything at all. She wanted to move her feet, but her entire body was pressed down by the other party's sturdy body, and his leg was entwined with hers. The other party's intention was very obvious, which made Lin Xiao's face turn darker and darker. He felt the breath on the skin of his neck, and the gentle brush of his lips. Lin Xiao really wanted to kick this person out of the window, but the other party's mind was not clear, and his instincts were like a beast doing what he wanted to do. Although she knew that he had been coveting her, she didn't expect him to only think about doing this with her. Lin Xiao felt angry and helpless. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In Wu Qingyue's subconscious, Lin Xiao's aura was the one he was most familiar with. Moreover, he had always treated Lin Xiao as his wife, and instinctively treated her as his partner. Wasn't the duty of a partner to carry on the family line and satisfy his needs? So a certain someone who had been abstinent before, after eating a certain zombie not long ago, that feeling was instinctively remembered by him. Therefore, he could not remember anything else, but he remembered that time when he had sex with Lin Xiao. The memories of that time were too wonderful, so he wanted more. When he was rational, he could still suppress it, but now that he was irrational, he could only follow his instincts. At this time, even if Lin Xiao wanted to use his mouth to transfer the energy lake water into the opponent's mouth, he was temporarily unable to transfer the water into his own mouth. Because her hand was being held down, she turned her face sideways, not intending to avoid his face. Anyway, if she didn't think of a way to stop him, She couldn't just stretch her neck and hide somewhere. Or she could only continue doing this so that he would let go of her hand. This way, at least she could use her hand to hold the water in her space in her mouth, and then entice him to drink it. His slightly cold but soft lips gently rubbed against the side of her neck twice, and then imprinted on it. Then, a suction force came from the skin of her neck, bringing with it a numbing sensation that quickly spread to her scalp. Lin Xiao's scalp went numb. A feeling of uncertainty arose in his mind. Her body seemed to be even more sensitive than before. It was just a light kiss. How could it make her scalp tingle? Lin Xiao could feel a very hot temperature from the other party's body. At first, Lin Xiao did not feel anything. But gradually, she could clearly feel the heat, and there was a certain thing pressed against her abdomen. Just by smelling her scent, he had become even more aroused. Could it be that her scent had this kind of medicinal effect? Hey, Wu Qinghua, wake up. Are you a dog? Suddenly, Lin Xiao felt a sharp pain on his neck, and he instinctively let out a soft cry. Snapping out of his daze, he turned around to take a look. There was a hint of dissatisfaction on Wu Qinghua's icy face. Xiaolin, what's going on? Can't he make me lose my focus? Wu Qinghua seemed to be a little unhappy with her lack of reaction, so he subconsciously bit her lightly. A purplish-red bite mark immediately appeared on Xiaolin's neck. As soon as she turned her head, 2 lips immediately pressed against her lips. A hot breath gushed out from the other party's nose, and then directly entered Xiaolin's nose. She felt her lips being crushed by his lips, and then being sucked twice. Then, a slippery tongue came out of the other party's mouth and licked around her lips. Then, it began to squeeze into her mouth, forcefully prying open her teeth and barging in. It was a familiar feeling, a familiar taste. Wu Qinghua's taste still carried a kind of fragrant and sweet taste of food, and it made her want to take a bite. Lin Xiao's eyes flickered slightly. Although she had no intention of responding to his kiss, she did not reject him anymore. She wanted him to relax and let go of her hand. Soon, Wu Qinghua let go of one of her hands. This was because his hand moved towards her chest, and then very roughly began to tear her clothes. Once her hand was free, Xiaolin hurriedly took out a glass of water. Then, she suddenly turned her face away with force, and saved her lips from the other party's mouth. Then, she poured the water in the glass into her mouth. Of course, because of her position, the entire glass of water splashed onto Wu Qinghua's bed, except for the mouthful that entered Lin Xiao's mouth. After putting the glass into her space, she immediately used her free hand to tilt Wu Qinghua's face, and then leaned forward to kiss his lips. Light up. Those who want to see the middle of the plot enter the group. At daybreak, Lin Xiao woke up when a ray of sunlight shone into her eyes. She squinted her eyes, and then opened them. After a few seconds of confusion, she turned her head to look out the window. However, when she moved, she found that her whole body was lying on her stomach, and her back felt like it was being pressed down by a mountain. The memory of last night instantly came back to her mind. Lin Xiao moved her hands and feet, and found that her movements were a bit like a turtle carrying a heavy shell, paddling its limbs in the water. She could move her hands and feet, but her body couldn't. Or was she more like the monkey that was pressed under the 5-finger mountain? After moving a bit, she felt that someone's thing was actually still buried in her body. Lin Xiao's face darkened. She suddenly turned around and flipped the person on her back. Then she added a kick. Plop. Ahem. A muffled groan mixed with the muffled sound of a heavy object falling to the ground rang out in the room in the early morning. Lin Xiao sat up, wrapped herself in the bedsheet on Wu Qinghua's bed, and got off the bed to enter the bathroom. She didn't even look at Wu Qinghua, who sat up from the ground with a confused look on his face. Wu Qinghua sat on the floor beside the bed in a daze, lying on the bed. After watching Lin Xiao enter the bathroom with the bedsheet wrapped around her body, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. In fact, after doing it once last night, he was already a bit clear-headed. He clearly remembered the feeling of the 2 times after that. After standing up, he found his underwear and trousers and put them on. He simply tidied up the messy bed, took a set of clothes from the wardrobe, and walked out of his bedroom. After Lin Xiao took a bath and put on the clothes she took out from her space, she saw that Wu Qingyue was already well dressed and sitting on the sofa in the bedroom, looking at her with a smile. Chapter 10:12. Lin Xiao pursed her lips, turned around, and walked straight to the door. As she walked, she said, "It was an accident. Don't think too much." When she said this, her eyes suddenly flickered. She knew that after last night, this man's feelings for her might have deepened. But she wasn't wrong. Last night was indeed an accident. It was just that the change in her mentality made him discover something. She didn't want to deny it, but she still couldn't suddenly accept it. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face faded a little. He sighed helplessly and said, "You're leaving now? How heartless." He had already guessed that she would react in such a way, but when he heard her words, he couldn't believe it. He was still a little depressed. But on second thought, at least she was doing well now, wasn't she? He could sensitively sense the hesitation and wavering in her words. This was already very good, and it could even be regarded as progress. Lin Xiao looked at his expression and didn't know why she felt a little upset. It seemed that he was disappointed that she regarded last night's incident as an accident. But what else could she do but regard it as an accident? She couldn't change her original decision just because of this accident. Lin Xiao even wanted to leave the room as soon as possible, not wanting him to see her wavering mood. She was afraid that if she stayed any longer, she might change her mind under his gaze. "But Xiaoting's full moon will be here in 2 days. Can you?" Wu Qingyue suddenly stood up and walked to her side. He looked down at her closely and said with a trace of appeal in his voice, "Can we do it here?" Lin Xiao's eyes narrowed as he stared at him. Then he blinked violently. She turned her head and looked away, saying coldly, "You have to ask Man this question. If he agrees, I won't stop you." She didn't refuse Wu Qingyue, because she knew that she didn't have the right to do so. Man had his own ideas, and she respected his choice. Wu Qingyue raised his hand and wanted to hug her, but he stopped before he touched her. He paused for 2 seconds, and then withdrew his hand. "Can't you stay and wait for his answer?" Lin Xiao turned around and looked at him strangely. "I have to go back to deal with the next thing." Wu Qingyue said, "It's just a small matter. There's no need to go back." He was already used to not staying in his own base to work, so he had no idea how hard it was for Xiao Liqing and the others to run errands. Xiao Lin, who was used to staying in his own headquarters to command the overall situation, didn't plan to send his arrangement back. Just as he was about to refuse, the sound of a car came from downstairs. Lin Xiao's expression froze. Then he suddenly glared at Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue immediately raised his hands and made a gesture of surrender. With a mournful face he said, "It's not me. This is what Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui wanted to do. I didn't agree at the beginning." He betrayed the 2 people below without hesitation. Lin Xiao could smell his son's scent from the cars below. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen were following them. Seeing Wu Qingyue's quick reaction and attitude of admitting his mistake, he could only drop the matter. Glaring at him angrily, Lin Xiao immediately opened the door and walked out. Wu Qingyue immediately followed behind, for fear that she would turn around and rush down to run away with his son. After the 2 went downstairs and walked to the gate of the courtyard, the cars outside the courtyard happened to come over and stop. 4 or 5 modified off-road vehicles were parked in a row. After the door opened, Xiao Yunlong was the first to come down with his long legs stretched out. "Oh, brother, you are really fast." Xiao Yunlong looked at the 2 people standing together at the gate of the courtyard, then looked at Wu Qingyue with a teasing smile. Wu Qingyue smiled faintly, but directly ignored him. Instead, he looked at his son who was being carried by Duan Wan in the middle of the car. He thought to himself, "You should be prepared to be cut by the female zombie. How come I don't know that Sea City's leader Xiao now has the habit of kidnapping other people's children?" Lin Xiao looked coldly at Xiao Yunlong and said lightly, but her gaze was like a knife piercing straight at him. Xiao Yunlong's whole body was cold, and his expression stiffened under her icy gaze. Then he smiled apologetically and said, How can it be called kidnapping? We just want our Sea City leader's son to hold a full moon banquet in our home." And we invited little Tongue here openly. It's too much to say that it's a kidnapping. Wow, Papa and Mama, did you guys make love last night? The smell on your body is so strong. At this time, a tender baby voice was full of energy and very loud. There seemed to be excitement in the voice. However, the meaning of these words made Lin Xiao's and Wu Qingyue's expressions crack. Others, can't laugh out loud, otherwise you will be beaten. But it's so uncomfortable to hold it in. What to do? Lin Xiao's whole body froze. She really didn't think that her son would dare to say such words in front of everyone. It was simply throwing her face back to the base. I really want to beat him up. No one can stop me. Wu Qingyue's expression was not as big as Lin Xiao's, but his smile also cracked, but he quickly made up for it. Looking at Lin Xiao's expression of, I want to beat this kid to death. No one can stop me. And her expression of rolling up her sleeves to beat him up. He said, Little Tongue, don't talk nonsense. Be careful that your mother will beat you up. Oh, feeling the storm coming from his mama, Little Tongue immediately shut up obediently. Pft. Ha ha ha. Sorry, I can't help it. Pft. Let me laugh. As a result, Xiao Yunlong suddenly couldn't hold back his laughter. And then seeing the gloomy eyes of Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue, he immediately turned his head and said with a smile while covering his mouth. Then from the point of view that Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue could not see, he secretly gave Little Tongue a thumbs up. Little Tongue rolled his eyes and said in his heart, Humph, I am saving you, but you actually laugh. What a pig teammate. A little figure quickly rushed in front of Wu Qingyue, hugged his thigh, and then looked at Lin Xiao next to him. Her delicate little face was overflowing with joy, and her eyes were shining brightly. Wu Qingyue picked Lingling up, looked at her lovingly and asked, Lingling, did you obediently sleep with big sister last night? Wu Yueling nodded hard, then turned her head to look at Lin Xiaolu, who was holding Tongtong's hand. Hello, Uncle Wu. The two children politely greeted Wu Qingyue, then looked at Lin Xiao. Aunt. Lin Xiaolu looked at Lin Xiao and called out happily, Aunt Lu. Tong was a little scared, shrinking half of her body behind Lin Xiaolu, and called out to Lin Xiao. Chapter 10:13. The corners of Lin Xiao's mouth twitched, smiling at the two little ones. Wu Qingyue looked at Xiao Yunlong, whose shoulders were trembling as he turned his back to them, and asked with a smile, Have you laughed enough? Cough, enough. Xiao Yunlong was stunned for a moment, then immediately adjusted his facial expression. Then he nodded and said in a serious manner, Then can you tell me what's going on? Wu Qingyue continued to ask with a smile, but secretly glanced at Lin Xiao's expression from the corner of his eyes. You suddenly ran to the sentient being's base without a word last night. What did we think happened? Then we received the news that those things appeared over there. So we followed to see the situation. Xiao Yunlong said. Duanwan walked to Lin Xiao with Xiao Tingting in her arms. Pay attention to what you say next time. Lin Xiao took Xiao Tingting and glared at him, then turned to look at Duanwan. Duanwan glanced at Xiao Yunlong and said with a strange expression, Cough. Leader Xiao said you had promised Leader Wu to bring Xiao Tingting to Sea City. But we didn't hear you mention this before, so we didn't let him take Xiao Tingting away last night. Then early this morning before dawn, he took advantage of Xiao Tingting's sleep and secretly took the child away when we weren't paying attention. Xiao Yunlong immediately looked up at the sky. Lin Xiao glanced at him, then faintly looked at Duanwan and asked, So you let him carry it over? Duanwan shook her head. We informed Deputy Leader Yuan and Deputy Leader Lin. Deputy Leader Lin's decision was that since you were in Sea City, and Leader Xiao had already taken the child out of the base, so we decided to leave the situation to you. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Xiaolu and Tong, then at Wu Qingyue. Do you have any collusion with Lin Feng? Also, when did I agree to let you bring the child over? The two children were brought over together. Lin Feng must have known of Wu Qingyue's decision, and he was helping him. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face stiffened. Then he said blankly, No? Why would you think so? Although he did mention this to Lin Feng, he really didn't have any agreement with Lin Feng. He didn't understand why Lin Feng would do that. Then he immediately looked at Xiao Yunlong and asked, "Also, when did I say she agreed? Don't drag me into what you're doing, okay?" When Xiao Yunlong saw that Wu Qingyue was dragging him down, he immediately became angry. Why didn't he think about who he was doing this for? Ha! You even brought the big one to your house to sleep. Bah! That one stayed there for the whole night. It's fine if you don't thank me for bringing the little one here. But you dare to sell me out? At this time, Tungting said in Lin Xiao's arms, "Mama, since everyone is here, let's go. Let's do it here. I'll ask Daddy to cook personally." Lin Xiao was speechless. Even little man was siding with Wu Qingyue. What else could she say? Yes, in Lin Xiao's heart, the name Little Man would follow his son for a long time. You don't have teeth to eat the food he makes. Why are you siding with him? Lin Xiao angrily glared at his son, and then stared at Wu Qingyue and Xiao Yunlong on both sides. Wu Qingyue smiled very thick-skinned, his eyes not moving. Xiao Yunlong continued to look at the sky and the earth, his eyes darting left and right. Come in first, what Xiaoting said is right. Since we are already here, 2 more days won't make a difference. And although the danger at the base has been temporarily lifted, it's hard to guarantee that those things won't come back. Wu Qingyue held Lingling and moved to the side, looking at Lin Xiao, and said with a smile. Xiaoting's attitude made him very happy, although this female zombie looked unhappy. But he knew that she would do as the child thought. That meant that Xiaoting's full moon banquet could be held here. Lin Xiao snorted silently, but did not refuse. Holding Xiaotung, he turned and walked inside, followed by Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen with the 2 little ones. Xiao Yunlong was relieved, and then walked inside with a face full of excitement. After entering Wu Qingyue's living room, everyone suddenly thought of what Xiaotung had just said. Looking at Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao's eyes became ambiguous again. Lin Xiao felt their eyes, and could directly sense their thoughts. His face darkened, and he suddenly stuffed Xiaotung into Duan Wan's arms. It's all because of this damn child. Fortunately, everyone present was on the same side, if it was heard by others. Let's not talk about the meaning of this child's words. Just the fact that a 1-month-old baby spoke was already very scary, okay? Look at the situation. I told you not to speak in a place with many people. Did you forget again? Lin Xiao glared at Xiaotung. Xiaotung turned his head to the side, not looking at her, but said unhappily, "But there aren't many people around." Lin Xiao said, "Do you want to scare other people's guards to death? Didn't you see the way they looked at you just now? It was like looking at a monster, you know?" Wu Qingyue went to the courtyard. There were originally 2 guards standing at the door, but after hearing the child's words, they were amused at first, but then they suddenly stared at Xiaotung with a face full of disbelief. When he came in, Lin Xiao's sharp ears also heard that Xiao Liqing had brought these 2 people to the cloud to keep it a secret. Otherwise, if his situation was leaked out so early, it would be strange if he was not caught for research. Xiaoting glanced at Lin Xiao, and suddenly shouted at Wu Qingyue, "Dad, quickly control her. She always bullies her son." Wu Qingyue, who was dragged into the water, thought, "What does it have to do with me?" The people of Sea City looked at the way the mother and son were talking with a curious expression, while the people from the Universal Life Base were already used to it. After Xiao Liqing came in, he moved closer to Xin Yuzhen in the corner, poked her with his elbow, and whispered, "Xiaotung is so bold. You dare to talk to your leader like this." Xin Yuzhen gave him a look, letting him understand by himself. Xiao Yunlong also stared at Xiaotung with a face full of excitement, and then looked at Wu Qingyue and said, "Tell me, how did you give birth to such a son? Teach me, let my you also give birth to a son like this." Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently, not saying a word. Wu Qingyue looked meaningfully at Xiao Yunlong, and said with a smile, "Let's not talk about whether you can give birth to a son like our Xiaotung. I haven't heard that Yu is willing to marry you. Isn't it too early to have a child? First of all, you have to marry her." Xiao Yunlong pointed to the 2 of them. "Didn't you also not get married?" Wu Qingyue said, "That was an accident for us." Accidents were not something everyone could have, and besides, Xiaotung was made by him to become his son. If it wasn't for little man, He didn't know if he could make this female zombie pregnant. While thinking, Wu Qinghua suddenly secretly glanced at Lin Xiao's stomach. He seemed to have tried his best last night. Would another one appear? Chapter 10:14. Wu Qinghua put Wu Yueling down and said to her, "Take the little sister and little brother upstairs to play." Wu Yueling nodded and stood up from Wu Qinghua's arms. She walked to the side. "Xiaolu, take him away." Lin Xiao immediately pointed at his son and said, "Okay." Lin Xiaolu walked in front of Duan Wan and carefully carried Xiao Tengteng. She had already learned how to carry this little brother. "Wow. What do you want to say that I can't hear? I want to hear it too." Xiao Tengteng was somewhat unwilling to be carried up. He had a premonition that what his parents were going to talk about was definitely about him. Children shouldn't care so much. Lin Xiao glanced at him and sat on the sofa with his legs crossed. He crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the sofa. Lin Xiaolu carried Xiao Teng and said to him, "All right, Ting Teng, don't argue with Aunt." Then she carried him and followed Wu Yueling upstairs. This wasn't the first time she came to Ling Ling's house to play, so she wasn't unfamiliar with it. After walking a little, Lin Xiaolu said with a smile, "You can't win against Aunt in arguments anyway." Xiao Tengteng. After the little brats went upstairs, the adults in the living room suddenly fell into a strange silence. Lin Xiao was a bit unhappy that his son was helping an outsider, so he didn't want to speak. Wu Qinghua felt that if he spoke, he might accidentally step on this female zombie's landmine, so he also remained silent. Xiao Yunlong looked left and right, then secretly looked at his brother. He saw that Wu Qinghua's mouth was smiling as usual, but the joy in his eyes was a bit stronger, and his face was full of satisfaction and tolerance. Obviously, last night was a good thing. They ate up all the people. After thinking about it, he immediately changed the topic and asked, "Right, what the hell ran away last night? They might come back in the future. Did you think of any way to deal with them? I heard that the situation last night was quite tragic." In any case, he also stayed at the base last night and basically understood the situation. Although he didn't personally go to the second base to see the situation of the zombies, but he heard that they were all terrible. Furthermore, the underworld creatures were active underground. Who knew if they would suddenly dig a hole under the human base one day? They are only afraid of sunlight and have other special abilities. They didn't appear during the day, and they had to keep an eye on him at night. We can't just isolate the base with a layer of isolation, right? These things can even destroy steel. Wu Qinghua couldn't think of any effective way to stop these things from invading underground. If they could not destroy the metal, they could still build a foundation underground. But to build an underground isolation foundation under the entire base, how long would that take? Obviously, it was not as easy as building a wall. In any case, it is necessary to strengthen the night patrol sentries. Xiao Yunlong stroked his chin, feeling that the situation of the Universal Life Base was quite tricky. Lin Xiao did not object to their opinions. He was also very afraid of these things. However, it was better to solve his own problems at home. Anyway, those things have been beaten back. According to the previous situation, they should be quiet for a few days. I'll figure it out myself. You don't have to worry about it for now. She pointed upstairs and said, "So you brought my son here just to have him hold a 1-month banquet here?" Ahem, well that's right. After all, we all wanted to see this child before. But we were all very busy and couldn't go to the Universal Life Base as guests. Sister-in-law, you also know that we now have to guard against the movements of China and Heaven Fire. Xiao Yunlong said. Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently. Since Little Man has agreed, I have no objection. Please remove the word sister-in-law. Thank you. Ah. Xiao Yunlong was stunned, a little embarrassed. He immediately turned to look at Wu Qinghua. Wu Qinghua winked at him, and then did not say anything. Ahem. Well that. Leader Lu. Isn't that too distant? Xiao Yunlong had to change the way he addressed him. Lin Xiao raised an eyebrow and said, "Whatever, I have no objection. As long as it's not that annoying way of addressing me just now." Uft, Xiao Liqing couldn't help laughing, and then quickly turned his head to hide it. Duan Wan glanced at him with a warning in her eyes. Her boss is in a bad mood now. You'd better not cause trouble. Xiao Liqing looked back and saw everyone looking at him. He immediately said, "Sorry. I'll stand a little further away." Xiao Yunlong was embarrassed by his laughter, but Wu Qingyue was very calm. Lin Xiao's eyes were still indifferent. What's so funny? That word really made her very upset. Ahem, I'm wondering why you call Little Tung man? This doesn't seem to be the right way to address a boy, Xiao Yunlong asked her puzzledly. Lin Xiao glanced at him. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with Leader Xiao. I don't need to explain. Xiao Yunlong was mercilessly rebuked, thinking that she was angry because he brought her son over without her consent. He was a little scared and immediately shut up. Ahem, since Little Tung agreed to be here, then can you arrange for the people that your universal life base wants to invite? The leader's child was 1 month old, although it was not convenient to inform everyone. But important people, trustworthy people would still be invited over for a drink. Therefore, the people they were going to invite were probably very important people in the 2 bases. On Wu Qingyue's side, at least the 3 leaders would be invited. On the surface, they were subordinates, but they were more like brothers and sisters, Xiao Liqing, Imo Li Mingyu, and some trustworthy people, such as Kong Qingming. Speaking of Kong Qingming, Wu Qingyue suddenly remembered that he had already sent people to inform them to come back, but they still hadn't come back. It was estimated that they encountered some trouble on the way. Fortunately, he had already sent a group of people to check the situation yesterday. Lin Xiao nodded. Got it, I will give you the list. Suddenly she asked, did you send people to find Kong Qingming's team? The people I sent haven't sent back any news yet. It seems that they encountered something. Lin Xiao had sent 2 wind zombie leaders to inform Lin Wenwen to come back to attend Little Tung's full moon banquet a few days ago. But there was no movement from the people who should have come back these 2 days. Wu Qingyue nodded. I sent people, but I haven't received any news yet. I sent more people to investigate the situation yesterday. Did you find anything on your side? There were people from their 2 bases in that group of people. When Wu Qingyue heard Lin Xiao's question, he knew that she should have noticed something. Lin Xiao crossed her arms in front of her chest and flicked her fingers on her arms. She looked at Wu Qingyue with an unfathomable expression and said, So you didn't notice the movements of the Chinese side? Chapter 10:15. Wu Qingyue looked at Xiao Liqing, who had retreated a little. Xiao Liqing had retreated a little, but that didn't mean he couldn't hear what they were talking about. He retreated a little further, but it was just to a subtle distance where he would not be caught in the crossfire. Now that they were talking business, Wu Qingyue shot him a look. Xiao Liqing stood back, his expression serious. China's cleanup operation was very effective. Most of our spies were wiped out. If we want to get more information, we'll need to rely on the survivors in China. It'll take a little more time. That's why we don't have much information on China's military and internal affairs. In other words, they were at a loss when it came to intelligence in China. Wu Qingyue looked at Lin Xiao and couldn't help but ask, So what did you find out? Lin Xiao's source of information was different from theirs. Xiedong's men were all zombies. These zombies were stationed outside China and Skyfire base, but they were sensitive to the presence of the living. If someone came out of the base, they'd be able to sense it. Then, they would track the whereabouts and movements of these people to determine who they belonged to. Lin Xiao's information was a little late, but it was accurate. She'd immediately sent for Lin Wenwen's team and called her aunt to come back for Xiao Tung's birthday celebration. She didn't know if Lin Wenwen's team had encountered the people from China, but now she knew they had. Wu Qingyue frowned. It looks like China has received information about Kong Qingming's mission. He'd thought they hadn't made a move, but they'd already made contact with the people he'd sent out. He'd fallen into a passive situation. At this time, Lin Wenwen, Long Qingying, Kong Qingming, and the others were being hunted. Not only that, his team had been broken up. They had been on the radar for 7 days when they found out. They'd been there for a long time, and their men and firepower were strong. They were led by 2 6th-level adepts. On their side, aside from Kong Qingming, the others were all below 5th or 4th level. Fortunately, When Lin Kuei was called back by Lin Xiao, he left Mo and Yi Qingxian, the two level 6 zombie kings. Otherwise, they might have all been captured or killed by the enemy. Under the resistance of Mo, Yi Qingxian, and Kong Qingming, Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying protected the level 4 Lung Xiantong and escaped. However, Long Qingying was injured in order to protect the two of them, and was saved by Kong Qingming, who rushed over. After Ink and Yi Qingxian arrived, they protected the others and continued to escape. However, Kong Qingming and Long Qingying separated from Lin Wenwen's team in order to draw away the firepower. Hiding in an underground warehouse, Kong Qingming was holding a flashlight in his mouth and bandaging Long Qingying's wounds. Long Qingying was already unconscious. Her chest and thighs were full of gunshot wounds. The light from the flashlight shone on the front of her clothes, making it look blood red. Rip. After Kong Qingming unbuttoned her jacket, he tore open her t-shirt, revealing the bullet wound on her chest. He breathed a sigh of relief. When he saw that the bullet was still a distance away from his heart, which had risen to his throat, calmed down slightly. He nimbly took out a dagger and burned it with fire. Then he started to gently cut open the bullet hole on Long Qingying's chest. He held his breath and helped her to pick out the bullet. Ding! The metal bullet fell to the ground and blood immediately gushed out. Long Qingying's body stiffened because of the pain nerves. Although she was unconscious, she frowned. Kong Qingming immediately threw the dagger in his hand to the side and used hemostatic powder to sprinkle on the wound. Then he used gauze to block the wound. Then he took out the flashlight in his mouth and put it aside. Then he took out a small tube of transparent medicine, bit it open with his teeth, and poured it into his mouth. Then, he pinched Long Qingying's chin, lowered his head, and pressed his lips against hers. He used his teeth to force open her teeth, and passed the liquid in her mouth over. This medicine was found on Long Qingying's body, because Long Qingying told him that it was medicine to treat wounds. He didn't have much gauze with him. Kong Qingming could only tear his jacket into strips and tie them around Long Qingying's chest to tie her wound. Then he continued to help her to pick out the second bullet in her leg. This time, Long Qingying was awakened by the pain. She let out a muffled groan and breathed heavily. Then she slowly opened her eyes and looked around instinctively. It was dark and quiet. The silence meant that she was temporarily safe. Feeling a familiar aura beside her, Long Qingying gradually regained her consciousness. "Where is this?" she asked weakly. Perhaps it was because he had just drunk some water, so his voice was still normal, but it was weak. "Underground warehouse." "Shoo. Don't talk, save some energy." Kong Qingming, who was tying her leg, was happy to see her wake up. Long Qingying looked at him and touched her chest. The bullet had been taken out, and the wound had been treated. She said expressionlessly, "Thank you." Kong Qingming tied a knot in the cloth, picked up the flashlight, and wiped the sweat off her forehead. Then, he pulled her into his arms and adjusted her into a comfortable position, letting her lie in his arms. "You're welcome. I'm also saving myself," he said. Long Qingying didn't quite understand what he meant. She was now an injured person, not to mention the fact that her combat power had dropped. Not only was she unable to move, but she would also be a burden to him. This was obviously not a good thing for him, but he said he was saving himself. "Why?" Long Qingying was silent for 2 seconds before she couldn't help but ask, "Why?" There was a gentle smile on Kong Qingming's disheveled face. "If something happens to you, what will I do? Then what's the point of living?" It was a very common line of love, but Kong Qingming said it so casually in this situation. Long Qingying suddenly didn't know what to say, because she could clearly feel that his words were filled with strong feelings. Ever since that incident last time, this man had been clinging to her, and his eyes were glued to her. Long Qingying originally thought that he was very annoying, so she had been avoiding him. She didn't expect that she would be injured, but he would still save her. She lowered her head and felt his strong heartbeat on her back. She didn't say anything. "It's okay, I'm here. I won't let you die." Kong Qingming's beautiful eyes looked at her in the dark night, and his hands were wrapped around her waist. He said softly, Chapter 10:16. On the other side, Lung Xiantong and Lin Wenwen were protected by Mo and Yi Qingxian, temporarily escaping from the enemy's pursuit. These diaries must not be obtained by them. Wenwen, you have a special ability to warn others. You are the one who can return to the base safely. So, you must take this diary with you. You must bring it back to Yun. Lung Xiantong passed his black leather notebook to Lin Wenwen and said to her with a serious expression. Lin Wenwen silently took the notebook and put it into her space, then nodded. But her expression was unresigned. Don't give up so quickly. I feel that we will be fine this time, trust me. Lung Xuantong's notebook recorded a large amount of his research data. Anyone who was a professional in this field would be able to understand it. Not only did it contain Lung Xuantong's research results, but it also contained a large amount of research data on mutated plants. If this was obtained by the Chinese, not only would they be able to deduce a lot of secrets in the base, they would also be able to obtain a lot of data on mutated plants. For the safety of the entire base, Lung Xiantong did not want the data to be obtained by the Chinese. And when Lin Wenwen looked at Lung Xiantong, she had a feeling that he would not die. She trusted her premonition because it was very accurate. Even if it was her good friend Long Qingying, who was suddenly separated, Lin Wenwen was not too worried. She could feel that the two of them would still be alive. China's technological weapons are getting more and more powerful. There are only 4 of us now. The chance of survival is very small. Lung Xiantong sighed dispiritedly and shook his head. Originally, they and the people from Haiqing had a total of more than 30 people. But the other party had at least 300 people. Moreover, they were divided into several teams to intercept them. They were all rank 5 metahumans. And they even had powerful new weapons developed by China. Just a bullet from a pistol could have the effect of a grenade. The range of a rifle could even reach up to 2,000 meters. The bullet's power and speed were more than 5 times that of a normal rifle. If they were targeted by the enemy's sniper, they would only be dead. They even developed a drug to cover up their scent, so zombies could not smell them. They could only smell the scent of the medicine when they got close. If they were far away, even Mo and Yi Qingxian, the 2 rank 1 king zombies, couldn't smell them. As for these ordinary zombies in the wild, they had not gone through any training, so even if they saw the Chinese convoy, they would not know what it was. Without the smell of food, in the eyes of the zombies, they were already in a state of nothingness. So Mo and Yi Qingxian were unable to get the location of those people from the surrounding zombies. If it wasn't for Lin Wenwen's awakened premonition and intuition, which allowed him to sense some danger in advance. Otherwise, they might be shot in the head by the enemy without even knowing it. More importantly, the enemy had sufficient firepower. As for them, they had almost used up all the firearms they had on them. They had only left their last weapons and bullets for Lin Wenwen, who was in the space element. The others were fighting with their own abilities. Mo was a metal-type zombie, while Yi Qingxian was a natural wood type. Be it in the wilderness or in the abandoned city, they had combat power. Although Lung Xiantong was only level 4, he was still an ice type. Apart from those who were strong, the rest of the team members had all been killed. They seemed to be in a passive position now. A few kilometers away from them, a few light armored vehicles were driving slowly. The people in the vehicles were almost fully armed, with all kinds of weapons and ammunition strapped to their bodies. Bang, bang, bang. The person in the front passenger seat of the vehicle in the middle reached out and patted on the roof of the vehicle. He asked loudly, "Haven't found the location yet?" A man standing on the roof was looking ahead seriously. After hearing the voice below, he replied, "The direction is correct, the location. I can't be sure from here." As he said that, he suddenly disappeared from the roof of the vehicle. After a few seconds, he appeared on the roof of a building next to him. The convoy did not stop because of his departure. Instead, they continued to drive forward slowly. After a while, the person on the roof directly jumped down from the building. After landing on the ground lightly and nimbly, he quickly ran towards the convoy. 10 o'clock direction ahead, go. He patted the door of the driver's seat, then flipped over and got on the roof again. The driver immediately sped up and drove in the direction he pointed. At this moment, Lin Wenwen, who was a few kilometers ahead, suddenly felt that she was being watched from behind. She immediately jumped up, her expression changed and said, "Not good. They are catching up, leave here quickly." The other's eyes were cold, and they immediately packed up and left. He quickly left the place, and after sensing the direction of the enemy's aura, he immediately rushed in another direction. The Chinese people divided into several groups to chase Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying's group. Behind the Chinese people, there were two groups of people catching up. The last two groups appeared. One group was zombies. There were only two of them, but they were very fast level 5 wind-type zombies. The other group was a team of about 10 people. It was the second group of people sent by Wu Qingyue to find Kong Qingming, Li Yushan's team. A male and female wind-type zombie leader quietly landed at the place where the Chinese people had just left. They were a little surprised to see the direction where the vehicles left with smoke and dust. The smell of these people was covered. If we were not close enough to see their figures, we would not have been able to find them. Under the sunglasses on the female zombie's face, her dark eyes curiously stared at the direction where the Chinese people left. The male zombie did not make a sound. It was not that he did not want to make a sound, but he could not speak. Well, because his position was not high, he did not get the treatment of having his throat repaired. This female zombie was actually number 2, Old Air, one of the two that followed Qiu Lily. After being promoted to level 5 by Lin Xiao, her throat was also repaired. Old Air, who had recovered her memory, thought of the time when Lin Xiao took her and number 1 to take a bath, and then she had a look of despair on her face. Speaking of recovering memory, after being modified by Lin Xiao's blood, most of the high-level zombies would gradually recover their memory. Some of them recovered half, although they did not remember their past. They still remembered a lot of habits and common sense. Some special ones could even remember their own body skills, because the body still had a memory of movement. So now in Lin Xiao's zombie army, the basic memory of zombies above level 5 had recovered, like Jing Yin Yin Xiao Zhong Asong and so on. The zombie standing next to Old Air was Asong. He had already remembered who he was. After the memory of the past came back, and mixed with the memory of being a zombie, he did have a few days of panic, but after Xie Dong specially counseled him, he quickly accepted his new identity. Looking at the excited expression on the faces of his companions, Asong indicated that he was ready to join in and stir up trouble. Chapter 10:17. Second brother's name was Yu Xiaoxian, but she didn't look like an immortal at all. Instead, she had a mischievous personality. Now she realized that this group of people from Wuxia didn't have that kind of fragrant smell, nor any other smell. If it wasn't for the fact that they were close, it would be hard to notice their movements. So Yu Xiaoxian immediately became interested. First, she wanted to figure out who this group of people were. Then she wanted to figure out what was going on with the smell on their bodies. As for the mission, she wasn't anxious at all, because she and Lu Mingsong could sense Mo and Yi Qingxian's location with the same kind of senses. They could also smell Lin Wenwen and Leng Xuantong's scent. Roar dash at this moment, Yu Xiaoxian suddenly raised her head and roared. While warning Mo and Yi Qingxian, she began to gather the surrounding zombies to come closer. This is the sound of zombies. It seems to be very close to us. After the people from Wuxia heard Yu Xiaoxian's roar, they were stunned. Then they all turned their heads to look behind them, but they didn't see any suspicious zombies. And from the sound, it seemed to be a bit far away. Are they coming for us? That's impossible. Our medicine is still in effect, someone said hesitantly. I don't know, maybe they're just passing by. The others replied. So, they were confident that the medicine on their bodies wouldn't attract the zombies' attention. So this zombie roar, they just thought it was a passing zombie, so they didn't pay attention to it. On the other side, Mo and Yi Qingxian suddenly stopped and looked back. They suddenly looked at each other, then said to Lin Wenwen and Leng Xiantong, "The leader sent someone to pick us up. Let's go in another direction." Lin Wenwen and Leng Xuantong's eyes lit up. Who is it? Mo replied, "Their strength isn't strong. They are 2 level 5 zombie leaders, but they are now following behind us, behind the enemy. It looks like they're going to cause some trouble for them. Leng Xiantong said. Why did the leader send someone again? What's the matter? Not long ago, they had just sent someone over and called back Lin Ran, who was originally protecting them with Mo and Yi Qingxian. It hasn't been that long. Why did they send someone again? Did something happen in the base? On the other side, Li Yushan and the others were chasing in the direction of Kong Qingming's signal. But the direction was not the same as Lin Wenwen and the others, and they were far away, so they did not hear Yu Xiaoxian's roar. After shouting, Yu Xiaoxian stared at the direction of the team. He suddenly said, They are heading towards Miss Wenwen's direction. Are they chasing after Miss Wenwen? Roar! The Chinese logo on their car. Lu Mingsong stared at the cars of the Chinese team and noticed that they had the logo of the Chinese base. Wuxia base. Why would they appear here? Well, since they were from China, then they definitely didn't have good intentions. You don't have to be polite to them. The corners of Yu Xiaoxian's mouth raised into a wicked smile, and her eyes flashed under the sunglasses. Then she said, If they are from Wuxia, then be careful of their weapons. Don't get close to them for now. Harass them from afar. The two of them were only leader-level zombies, so they couldn't summon mini-zombies. But if they could consume some of these people's ammunition, it would be good. After saying that, Yu Xiaoxian jumped down from the building, and then quickly made a half-circle from the side, and rushed to the front of the team. Lu Mingsong saw that she had disappeared, and immediately went to the other side. The Chinese people were driving forward, and suddenly the man on the roof of the car looked a little gloomy. He began to pay attention to the movement around him. Soon he saw that the zombies who had ignored them were moving in the direction in front of them. Moreover, he was walking in a hurry. Although he wasn't running crazily like when facing a zombie tide, he was walking very fast. He wasn't walking slowly like he usually did, where he would stop for a few steps. What's going on? Why are these zombies moving forward? Wasn't the roar of the zombies behind us? The man on the co-driver's seat found something wrong, and frowned and said to himself. After a while, they found that there were more and more zombies around them, although these zombies didn't pay attention to them. But the direction was still moving forward, and many of them began to walk in front of their road, blocking the way. As the road in front of them grew, more and more zombies came up, blocking the front of their car. The people had to clear the road while continuing to drive forward. Bang, bang, bang dash. The people in the car put their guns out of the window, or climbed directly on the roof, and began to shoot the zombies walking in the middle of the road in front of them. These zombies walked by themselves, and when they were shot in the head, they directly fell down. The other zombies didn't care, and continued to walk. Although it was easy to kill these zombies that wouldn't rush to them, after killing these zombies, their bodies would fall on the road. The car directly rolled over them, and the car bumped back and forth, which was also very uncomfortable. If this went on forever, their car would not be able to drive fast, and it would create the possibility of the target escaping. So they had to find out what was going on with these zombies first, and then get rid of the source. The man on the roof thought for a moment, and immediately jumped down from the roof. He jumped onto a telephone pole by the roadside, and then jumped onto the roof of a building by the roadside. Then, he quickly sped up along the rows of buildings and rushed forward. He wanted to see what was in front of them that attracted these zombies. However, at this time, suddenly a few tornadoes appeared, and directly swept towards their car. The tornadoes rolled up sand and lighter objects began to spin, and then threw them towards the location of the few cars. What's going on? Tornadoes? There are wind zombies and psychics. Enemy attack. When the people from China saw several tornadoes appear high up, they immediately realized that there might be wind zombies or psychics in the surroundings. Several tornadoes added together caused the air to fluctuate, and the surrounding sand and stones flew, and the leaves were blown away. Moreover, the wind can't be said to be big, but it also can't be said to be small. Although the surrounding mutated trees swayed, and the leaves fell, but the roots of these trees could still firmly stand on the ground, and were not uprooted. However, this wind could cause people's vision to be in a situation where even opening their eyes was difficult. Although they immediately realized that there were wind enemies in the surroundings, the other party obviously didn't intend to show themselves. Roar, roar, roar. At this time, the surrounding zombies that originally ignored them suddenly turned around and began to grimace, becoming very fierce, and madly rushed towards the people from China. It should be a wind zombie. Seeing these zombies' reaction, the people from China immediately guessed that it was a level 5 or level 6 wind zombie hiding behind them. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.